Hello and welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today and that you're watching this either live or later on your own schedule. We're glad you're here. Today we've got a very interesting episode. Tom wanted to talk about grief and how the grief process is not necessarily how Hollywood portrays it, especially for neurodivergent folks. The grief process can take a lot of twists and turns, but most importantly, part of what is needed to process grief is to feel safe and joyful, which I know what I'm saying. It's the 2020s, and that's like, really, Glory? Is that a thing? And yeah, that essentially grief is something, the processing of your grief is something that we do when we are playing, when we are joyful, when we feel safe. And so that is essentially the premise of, at least as Tom explained it to me, that he wants to talk about today. So here we are. Hold up, let me get him. You know him. I love him. It's my brother and our technical producer, Tim.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And hello, Laura. It's like I just saw you.
Yeah, I was just getting a few more things pulled up. The wheel of emotions are surprisingly not a universal set on this wheel. There's like 4 major different ones. I was kind of surprised looking for the one I was trying to find.
The wheel of emotions? What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
What is... Oh, are you talking about that thing?
It starts out with, in the center is like,
the most simple,
basic emotions.
Yes.
And then we see them split up into more finer type of emotions. And then from that, we actually usually get a third round of, these complex emotions that we tend to actually use and in everyday conversation. Of, we don't say as much that we're sad. We say we're upset. We say we're down, these more nuanced levels. Hey, Adrian.
Hey, Adrian. And a bottle of rum.
But
bit of a pirate theme today, I see in the chat.
But yeah, like the reason I wanted to bring this up is I know, at least growing up, when you're a child, you hear about the strange things adults do from grief.
Yes.
But they don't really ever talk about how do you handle grief. It's one of those things, we tend to expect people to pick up on their own.
Like, don't you just intuitively know how to grieve? I'm like, no. No one knows.
And just that whole, why am I doing this? I feel like something is possessing my body and mind. This is not how I normally am. Why am I acting this way?
And usually people answer grief. You wouldn't know what that's like. I remember having a similar conversation with you about 9 months after Mom passed. Yep. And you're like, I don't know why I'm like this. And I'm like, grief? Because do you think it has something to do with the conversation we just had about Mom? And you were like, could it be that? I was like, yeah, buddy, Mom's not even a year dead. Yeah. And you were just blindsided, and you're like, I'm going to need to sit in the truck for a little while. So I got out and, I went to the friend's house that we were helping them pack. I mean, Tom eventually came out of the truck.
But I mean, we hear little bits and pieces of like, the 5 stages of grief. And how,
that author actually changed it to 7 stages.
Yeah, and the author's now changed it to 7. Uh-huh. And the author often talks about, feeling very similar to the author who did the research on wolves and wolf hierarchy, of they meant to, help people understand psychology and basics of it when they wrote their initial book and everything. And they've tried to now update it to better explain it because there's definitely been some misunderstandings.
True. The
And
whole
people,
alpha and beta male thing.
yeah, and how people don't want to update. They just want to stick with these really basic,
Archaic, kind of dysfunctional ideas.
yeah. And so I wanted to kind of bring up. So here's what we now know, which is very different. Like, the stages are not in order, they are not sequential, they are not separate. Their emotions, they all come at their own time, and you will revisit them. And that grief is not a specific, there's not specific timing. Like, you don't just have grief in response to something. You sometimes can have grief even before it's happened of this might be a possibility, and you will see people start grieving.
Yeah, I did that. That was why the loss of our mother didn't affect me as much in the same way, because I had been preparing for her death for over 10 years at that point.
Yeah, she'd had cancer three
Three
different times.
times that we knew of, and it turned out she'd actually had it 2 times before it, but it had resolved itself. It turns out tumors can calcify and they just stop growing. And her body had calcified 2 different kinds of cancers, her lung cancer and brain cancer.
Yeah.
And that had not even been diagnosed till the last time she had cancer. So, but like this was the 3rd time we knew that she'd had cancer. None of them were related, by the way.
Yeah, not at all.
We asked every time, could this be metastasized to the lung? And they're looking going, no, we biopsied it. It is absolutely not related. And it was like, lady, But anyway, so I had been preparing for 10 years for the loss of my mother, and Tom had not.
Well, you had a lot more interaction with her, especially that first cancer.
Yeah, because I went to all her appointments.
Yeah.
I drove her.
And I had almost none. And then I had some with her second cancer. And then this third one.
Getting my degree in education, and it was so intense. Those last 4 semesters were so intense. I could not help take care of her. And I was like, what about you have other children? Are they not available?
And so there I was helping. So, that helped me to get some of it started. And then, the third one was just hopeful. Oh, no, this is just downhill. And then, 2 years of watching it go more downhill.
Yes.
And
still, like her actually dying, I remember that really just, you were in disbelief for months after she died, of like, I can't believe she's actually gone. I keep waiting to get an email from her.
And what I saw was,
hello, Jules,
was that I had done essentially pre-grieving, especially with that second one. So yeah, I didn't actually have that much initial grief, which surprised me at her passing. But then later on, I started to have a lot more processing of grief with the emotions and the situations. And I was still very confused of it. As Gloria was saying, like, there I am just kind of stuck in the truck dealing with my sudden, onset of grief again. And then I didn't even realize was going to happen. I thought it would be fine. I mean, really, I didn't have much grief in her passing for about the first 6 months, and it weirded me out.
Like, we talked about it. Tom and I talked about how, like, I was processing. I did have some grief after Mom died. I was upset that there were various milestones that were finally happening in my life. She had been involved in the, getting to that milestone. But when the milestone actually happened, she wasn't there. And it very much hurt that she was not there to see that I finally got a divorce. Look, I got a job at a library system. It's one of those jobs she always wanted me to have, was to be a librarian. And she wasn't there. And all of these things, they were not as joyful because she was not there to share in the achievement. And so, yeah, from time to time I would cry. Obviously still am. She's been dead more than a decade. But, Tom would just kind of stare at me and just sit there and listen to me cry and listen to me rant about why I'm crying. And I was like, do you experience this ever? Is this, and Tom's like, not yet. No, I don't know why I'm not. So for the first 6 months after Rob's passing, we both were confuzzled about why Tom was not having any grief moments. Hello,
Hey,
CB.
CB.
So, hello, cat.
Hope everything went well.
Yes. Thanks for the love. Hold on, I'm clicking things and you're clicking things.
Fine, I'll let you.
Thanks for the love. Siblings. So, and Tom was like, I don't know why I'm not feeling anything. But numbness is a part of grief. So, okay, I want to, just because we're talking about it for a moment, I think I want to point out, in the past, I did not understand why sometimes people feel numb. Like, even when I felt it, I didn't understand why I was feeling it. And I want to point out, so numbness has a purpose. Both physical numbness and emotional numbness has a very important purpose to human species survival. And so, since I didn't understand it, I'm going to bring it up to you. Maybe you already understand it, but maybe you don't. So let's go over it. There is a very important survival reason that humans feel numb from time to time, like physically or mentally or emotionally. And here it is. If you don't feel like you're in a safe space, or your back of your brain doesn't feel like you're in a safe space, you will not feel the pain, no matter what kind of pain it is. You could be at the hospital, you're in traction. How are you feeling? Oh, I feel fine. I don't feel any pain. No, I don't need any pain meds. Take the pain meds anyway, y'all. Because your body is feeling it, your brain is feeling it, but it's protecting your consciousness from processing that pain, because you need to function to survive. And that is the purpose of numbness, is to get you to the safe space without falling apart into little pieces, unable to move any further, and then, open to predators. So there is a super important reason. I've heard some people like yell and rant about being numb. Oh, I wish I could feel. This is so unfair. It's not right. I should be able to feel the pain of my father's death, da-da-da. And I'm telling you now, no. If you feel numb, there is a very important survival reason that you feel numb, rather than experiencing your feelings or experiencing your pain sensations. And that is because the back of your brain is absolutely convinced you're not in a safe space. Even if you think you're in a safe space, if the back of your brain isn't convinced, then maybe you're not in as safe a space as you want to believe you are. So, again, I want to point out, it is a good thing. It is there to protect you. It is there to keep you safe and get you to that safe space. And that is not like, oh, well, I'll just feel numb for a day. No, you can feel numb for months. And I've known a few people, the longest I've ever heard anybody's just felt numb and felt no other emotions was about 2.5 years. And it wasn't that's the limit to how long your body and your brain can keep you numb. No. That's how long it took him for his life to change to the point that he really did feel he was in a safe space and protected by others, where he could then feel his feelings, feel his physical pain sensations. In fact, his whole body fell apart for a little bit. Doctors couldn't find out a reason. The answer was grief. His body fell apart for a little while. It wasn't permanent, thank goodness. But like he could barely walk there for a while. Like his body, when I say fell apart, I mean it fell apart, because the grief he had over the loss of his father was that tremendous. But he said, looking back, I could tell I wasn't in a safe space. Like, I could see it now, but at the time I thought I was safe. But I see I really wasn't being, like, there was nobody there looking out for me.
And sort of to, talking about that numbness and safety, that is also why you will hear of a lot of people that will be a bit numb, act normal at home. The place they tend to always have breakdowns, at least in America, um, is in their cars. Also, that's usually where people will have the most emotionally laden conversations with people, is in cars where they parked, often at their home or another of their favorite places, because it's often easier to feel safe in a car. You can see everything coming towards you. You know nothing's coming towards you. You have mobility there. There's not going to be a lot of surprises, and you're often as the person at the steering wheel having these conversations
Mm-hmm.
because they feel in control. So the back of their brain actually feels safe enough to process these emotions. It's also why, how many times have we seen scenes in movies and just been with people where they have these emotional outbursts, and sometimes catharsis, singing a song while driving because they feel in control. Their brain tells them they're in a safe location. Even though they may need to then pull on the side of the road because too many tears are blurring things and it's hard to see.
Mood and a half.
But that is why you often see cars, like even at the house, you don't always know, oh, someone at any point could come to the door and knock. There's so many variables inside even your own home that you may be like, but I'm fine here. I've got everything I need. Why don't I feel safe? Because there's still unknowns.
And also, there's all sorts of family baggage in most people's homes, and reminders of all sorts of other unprocessed feelings and experiences. It's laden with a lot of things at home. But like in a car, you could just drive away from your feelings. You could just drive away. And so yeah, it feels like you're more in control and you're safer because you could just drive away. If there's a threat, you just drive away.
And if you ever need, and Gloria and I did figure this one out, just a little tip. If you ever need a safe place to have an emotional outburst and catharsis, and you're like, but I don't want anyone to disturb me.
Right?
Hospital parking garages are one of the few places where even the cops, the local security detail will leave you alone because it's expected there.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's no one in the hospital or anything, there's no one,
You can cry all you want and no one will ever knock on your window.
Nope.
In a hospital parking lot or parking garage. I learned this with mom's first cancer. And versus, let me tell you, you drive to Walmart, people, even if you park in the back of the Walmart parking lot, people going to be like, ma'am, are you okay? Like, bitch, I'm trying to be alone here to cry.
Or at the mall parking lot.
Yes. But if you are crying in a hospital parking lot, they just assume they don't want to know that it's like, no, we're fine. So even if you don't have anybody at that hospital or anything, you just need to get some tears out or you need to vent or scream. You can scream there and the security will not knock on your window. You get absolute privacy. It is fantastic. So any emotional outburst you wish to express, I highly recommend hospital parking lots. You can also, by the way, do it just standing in the parking lot, like on one of the edges, and like you just scream a little bit. You can rant to people, like not like random people. I mean, but like if you're talking to somebody and you're ranting, nobody gonna come by and go, "Hey, what's the trouble here?" Nobody but gonna bother you. It's great. Yeah, I cannot recommend enough hospital parking lots for all your emotional needs. Also, you can sleep in a hospital parking lot and nobody is going to give you trouble. Because again, they're assuming you've got somebody inside and this is how you're coping. So like, yeah, I've had people like where I've slept at my university parking lot when I was a student there and needing to just take a nap between classes, and people knocking on the window, "Are you okay? We just thought you looked dead." Like, I'm fine, go away. I had to put up a sign. I literally had to make a sign and keep it in my glove compartment. I'm alive and napping between classes. and literally had to put it up on both my driver's side window and the windshield so that the security and other college students would leave me alone to nap between classes. But in a hospital parking lot, they're going to leave you alone unless you look like you're visibly rotting. It's great. By the way, because for the most part, most of the people who watch this are writers or are interested in being writers, I just want to point out all the things we're saying are also great if you have a character who is processing grief. That is partly why we're giving extra details, is so that, you know, maybe it might like kind of inspire you to add a little bit more depth to your characters. Because when you do that, you are helping readers learn how to grieve as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to like also point that out of like, this is not good just for you. This is also good for your character writing. So just throw that out
there. I put up a odd little poll for people.
Oh, let's see what we got. Favorite way to trigger your emotions: music, physical activity, playing a game, going to a location.
And that this is perfectly healthy to do. And as we said, sometimes you will be numb because you have to function in this world. You know, that is part of being an adult versus being a child. You know the emotions you have, and you know you can't always just act the way you want. It's not always a good way to be. So sometimes, you know, when we have a moment and we know we're pent up, we'll, you know, get ourselves to start feeling, to, you know, process them out. I mean, I know Glory has had some really good playlists. And she's made up specifically just for helping process out different situations.
It is true.
So, all right, let me pull up my notes. That's part of why I actually made them. On some things I think most people don't always know about grief, that I thought would be in particular, you know, probably the number one is grief is not an emotion. Grief is a situation. You know, that is one I hadn't even thought
Isn't it
about.
one? Grief is a process. Let's see, Jill says, I would also add to the poll watching others cry. Sometimes sympathetic crying helps trigger your own.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Again, it's letting yourself know you're in a safe place.
Mm-hmm. The catharsis of someone else's expressing their emotions.
But yeah, like it is a process, and it's like, well, what's the purpose of the process, or why do you have grief? And it's grief is a situation your mind realizes where the future you had thought was possible has stopped being possible. Which is why you have grief not only when someone passes away, because they are no longer in your future, but it can also be not getting the job you were looking for, not getting into the college program you were looking for, not getting, you know, that summer internship you were trying for,
or like realizing somebody is not the friend you thought they were, and that truly like there is such a big divide that this person can no longer be the friend you thought you were going to have, and having to grieve the loss of that relationship, or breaking up with somebody, like actively breaking up with like a romantic partner.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of that future's gone, because our brains are predicting machines. That's where you get so much dopamine, is when you correctly predict something and then it happens. So this is essentially the loss of all of that. Your predicted brain was not accurate because you didn't get the scholarship. You didn't get the romantic relationship you thought you were on that path to.
And like that is why I was not grieving my mother that much for quite a while, because my brain was still going, she'll be back. She's going to rise from that grave and go, why'd you put me in there? I was tired, just taking a nap. Of it hadn't even quite reached that point where it had gone, no, this person's truly gone.
Denial
So,
is a hell of a drug.
yes. And so you didn't see a lot of the other emotions showing up till the brain was finally ready to accept, nope, she would have come back by this point. She's gone. And that's where you see the loss start spawning all of these emotions and thoughts. And so this is just your brain trying to grasp with the, okay, we have to now close down all of these future predictions. They're all gone. Now let's try to make some new ones. And that is where the pain comes from, is you have to come up with some new futures. That is actually where you see people finally get over their grief, is when they finally have new purpose, new futures planned out.
Gosh, I gotta be honest, that one's the hard one for me. Is filling the hole that the loss leaves, the hole in my life, the hole in my heart, whatever. And some holes I had to learn, and I was prepared by others. I had asked friends who'd lost their mothers, particularly who lost their mothers to cancer, of what to expect. And one friend who, but when I asked her, her mother had passed 20 years prior of cancer. She told me, when your mother dies, it leaves a hole in your heart that will never be filled. And she said the first 5 or so years she tried to fill that hole and nothing could fill it. And what she finally learned was it's impossible to fill that hole. So you have to just go on living your life with a hole in your heart. And she said that was the hardest thing for me to learn. And so mom was still alive. This was actually the early stages of mom's sickness that last time. So I had about a year and a half before mom passed to really meditate on the idea of walking around with a hole in my heart for the rest of my life. And that it won't kill you. You're so sure you've got to fill that hole so you'll live.
And the part that also helps to know, and is part of the secret to getting through that grief, is that, yes, you now have a hole in your heart for every time you have grief. But the way you handle that hole is your heart gets bigger. So the hole itself is much smaller compared to the size of your heart, to the size of your compassion and your love.
Mm-hmm.
The people who never get through their grief are the ones who never grow more compassion. And so that hole never gets smaller compared to life.
Kat says Nat grieved. Nat is Kat's roommate. Grieved that how college ended for her because she graduated during the height of the pandemic in 2020. Yeah. That she had to grieve of not getting a college graduation the way she was expecting.
And the congratulations and the
parties.
The parties.
All the people visiting and you running into in the street, all of that. You're not even running into anybody in the street anymore, at the height of the pandemic. Like you're not even running into people. And even if you did, you wouldn't know because everybody's wearing masks. So, it's before we learned what all of our friends and family look like with a mask on. So we recognize them by their eyes and their clothing choices. Yeah, losing all of that, because normally college graduation is like a truly joyful event for at least a year.
Mm-hmm.
She went to art school and was supposed to have a really nice art show. Yeah, that'll do it too. Having to grieve that because you can't get it back. There are so many things, particularly in the 21st century, that like so many of us, I would say all of us, most of us anyway, have to grieve. Including lifestyles we will never be able to have again or ever attain if we were on that path, because the world has changed so dramatically. And for good reason, it's changed in many ways, but still, it's changed. And it's not going to go back.
And so also, there is no, something else I've seen that's like truly, get over this. There is no hierarchy of people's grief. There is no, oh, well, I'm grieving this, so this person's grieving even harder because this is
Oh,
what
you
they're
mean
grieving
like
about.
the loss of your mother versus the loss of your college graduation that you're
Yeah.
expecting? Like, no, each person, your grief is valid. It is your own grief. Honestly, it doesn't even necessarily feel different.
Yeah.
Like, the whole left in my life from the loss of my mother was quite a bit. And it wasn't like I've lost jobs, I lost a marriage at one point. And I'm here to say, like, in the moment of grief, it doesn't feel that different. Grief just feels like grief because you're dealing with the loss of a future for the most part, and maybe even a loss of a belief system, depending on, what has happened in your life. But in that moment, they feel not that different.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference I felt with the loss of my mother versus all the other grief I'd experienced before and the grief I've experienced since, the only difference I'd say is I understood when I was like processing the grief over the loss of my mother, I understood that this is going to be big. So the tears when I was shedding, it wasn't a why am I crying about this? It was, oh yeah, this is just a drop in the bucket. Like, I understood essentially that this was more magnified, that this was going to be so much more of a magnitude of grief. And that is true in the length, but not in the heaviness of the feelings at the time. Actually, I would say, no, they didn't feel that much more heavy, actually. They just go on so much longer. Because I've gotten over the end of my marriage and the loss of, my then husband, but I'm still not over the loss of my mother. There are times I still tear up because it's like something only my mother could address or something only my mother could fix. And no one else in my life has come in who can do the same thing in this regard that she could. Like, to this day, nobody could adjust my bra strap just right like she always could. How did she know? Nobody, y'all. Not even professional, like, the people who size you for your bra. None of them can adjust my bra straps just right. She knew exactly how to do it. Where it wasn't too tight, it wasn't too loose. It was just right. Just the way I like it. Snug, but not oppressive. Because, I got to hold up these boulder holders. So, that is not the only time when I miss my mother. But it is one of the recurring times. In fact, how much, maybe I don't wear the same bras anymore so that I will not miss her as much as I do my life how I want. But anytime I hit a new milestone, like even setting up my Amazon author page, yeah, I had a little sad moment afterwards because she would have been so proud. And I would have been like, what? It's no big deal. And she would have been like, it's a big deal. I'm proud. Like, she would have been so proud. And it's so, yeah, I had like a little sad time and I listened to some sad music. And then it was like, because grief is a spiral, it's not a circle. Every time you revisit the same feelings, you're a little bit different. So it's really more like a spiral as you slowly go up. And I'm sad she's not here because she would have loved it. She would have gloated, y'all. Oh, God, when she'd gloat, she looked like a frog. She would have gloated so hard. And, it would have been nice.
And like, I know one of the other, things that is, in the end, a difficulty now is you still have the old tapes from your childhood of that mother you grew up with, but that was not necessarily the same mother as your adulthood. The one you got to know, once you moved out and now can make your own decisions, could start seeing things also a bit more from her perspective as another adult. And like, I know how much she would want to fight, the internal version of herself from your childhood about your writing.
Oh, God, yeah. My mother, when I was in middle school, was a very critical, I would say overly critical person.
Hey, Spence.
Hey, Spence. She was definitely fighting her own demons.
Dealing with a lot of depression.
And she was dealing with a lot of undiagnosed, untreated depression at the time.
And the dissolution of her marriage.
Yes.
That, our parents did not talk about.
And so she was dealing with her own grief. And quite honestly, more than a few times she took it out on me, and she took it out on my writing when I was just a little tiny baby writer. This is after I won my first award from the Yoknapatawpha Arts Council. If you're familiar with William Faulkner, you'll be familiar with the Yoknapatawpha Arts Council. Yoknapatawpha is not a real county in Mississippi, but William Faulkner would have you believe it was. It's based on a real county, though. And she was not critical of my writing until after I won that little award. It was just a little award. It was $10. It was a 2-page handwritten essay I wrote about my brother and me and our relationship. And I was really thrilled because I didn't know you could earn money from writing before that. And to find out, wait, you can get money for this? Oh, I could do this. And that's when she became very cruel. But that is not, let's see. So if I was 11, 12, 13, then she was about 50 at the time. And she was 65 when she passed away. I'm here to tell you now, the woman who was 50 and was overly critical and quite frankly cruel at times about my writing was not the same person at 60 who was so proud of everything I wrote and was proud when it got under the skin of the elite and that they tried to kick me out of my university for writing a sex column. And she was so dang proud, and I didn't even realize she was proud. She was so proud. She was like, yeah, stick it to the people of power. Yeah. And they were so mad when they found out they couldn't expel me for writing for my university newspaper. They were so sure they could expel me for writing for my university newspaper. The only reason they couldn't was because of how it had reformed after it was dissolved due to the civil rights movement in Mississippi. So truly, we stand on the shoulders of giants. But yeah, if it had been 40 years prior, they would have been able to expel me. And she was so proud of all of that. And she was very supportive, even though she and I may have disagreed over where the commas go and, which hook line to lead the story with. She was so proud and she was so supportive. And she was always like, what are you going to write next? What are you working on now? You should work on something. And then she would constantly be trying to pitch ideas for me to write about stuff just so that I would keep writing. She was so happy I was writing. But yet, in the process of processing grief, I also have to deal with every incarnation of her. which means right now, once again, I am dealing with my overly critical mother from when I was in middle school, who was dealing with a whole lot of her own personal problems and taking it out on her eldest daughter. Taking it out with no adult supervision.
Yeah, which I would then see 2 years later as I started to hit puberty and started sounding a little bit like my father. And so just anytime I talk, it would just trigger her.
To the point that even now you raise your voice. So, you're the octave of your voice, the tenor of your voice a little bit so you don't sound like dad.
Yeah.
Even though mom is gone. And dad is gone too.
But yeah, my voice is actually an octave higher. So I do not sound also, well, not just because of our mother, but also just people in general so I do not sound as intimidating.
Well, you raise your voice an octave higher than where your natural register is.
Yeah, because when I speak in my actual voice, which is very deep, I see people kind of back away a little.
Mm-hmm.
They sometimes cringe of, everyone else also is coping with childhood traumas. So, I too am handling it in my own ways.
Yeah. And that is still all part of processing grief. It lasts a very long time. Spence says, I relate to that. The version of my mom I have now compared to the version of my mom I had when I was a kid is a major difference. But the back of our brain still has to reconcile this. We still need to grieve the loss of support that we did not have when we needed it at our most vulnerable. Also pre-divorce and post-divorce. Yeah.
Versus our father, we have to just accept of, his mental deterioration was going while we were kids. And so we know that the happy versions we liked of him when we were small children were not false memories or stuff we made up.
Fake, or he wasn't faking it.
It's just as time went on and dementia progressed, because he was already an older father to begin with.
Yeah.
A lot of them got lost, and he ended up becoming one of those angry, paranoid dementia ones, people.
I would come home from a full day's work at Cellular One, like working a 9-hour shift. And I would be unlocking my front door of my apartment. He would be inside the apartment, and I could hear him throwing plates at the front door, throwing my dinner plates at the front door, and knowing I was about to walk into that. So I would have it unlocked and then wait till I heard a pause in the plate throwing to then open it so I didn't, essentially get a plate to the face. That was how much mental deterioration he was going through at that point. And that was when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
He sat on my cat for 6 hours. She was still a kitten at the time, and her only defense was to, crawl deeper to the couch and wait for me to come home. And then forever afterwards, she was traumatized by anybody sitting on a couch. If she was sitting anywhere near the couch, she would just run, just in reflexive. He's like, I think I might have sat on your cat. I didn't realize. I'm like, how long did you sit on the cat? And he's like, probably about a half hour after you went to work till right before you came home. Yeah. And having to grieve oh my God, I've totally traumatized this sweet little kitten. Just because I was trying to take care of my father. She didn't need this. She had her own problems. She was a little feral kitten. I thought I totally abused this cat, and this cat was never gonna this cat would never willingly be with me because of that. And then it was only after Andy passed away, I don't know, 14, 15, 16 years later, actually, that Tom and I were talking about memories of Andy and realizing she'd been sneaking out of the house every single day for the last like 8 years and just like roaming the neighborhood, and then Ferris Bueller racing me back home whenever she saw my car coming around the corner onto the block to drive home. She was literally racing me into the house so that I didn't realize she'd been gone the whole time. And that she did that for literally years. So, no, she was willingly there. She willingly lived with me. I just didn't know she had autonomy. So, sometimes out of grief actually comes joy naturally of realizing now that we have, like, we could take a step away from the situation or the person of, oh, that is who they really were. And who they really were was a lovely person. It's just other things were clouding it, like mom dealing with untreated depression and the dissolution of her marriage when she thought she would never get divorced. She was not that kind of person. She grew up believing when you're married forever, no matter what, which not that functional. And versus dad, he had mental deterioration. And so the person we remember from our young childhood is probably truer to the person he really was, because now of what we know about dementia and how it affects the neurology of a person, it really is a deterioration of them as they regress, and they're unable to even control their impulses. So that who daddy was the last like 5-10 years of his life is not really an accurate reflection of who our father was as a person. The things he said to us when we were young, that was so much more true of who he was than at the end. And so grieving the loss of these people even before we realized we lost them. Spence says, I still have breakdowns trying to work out a situation in a way that doesn't let my mom violate my boundaries. And then she reacts the way I wish she would have. And I wasted so much energy on prep work. Yeah, but you're trying to protect yourself emotionally from getting blindsided. So it is understandable, because you absolutely do need to protect your own psyche. Because you need to keep being functional and moving forward as a person, both for yourself and for your children and for your family. You need to do that. And so you've got to protect that person who's still trying to live a life and move forward and grow and develop and be a good example. So yeah, you need to protect them so that they are not blindsided, emotionally unable to function. Makes sense.
But yeah, so this first hour, I mostly just wanted to kind of go over what we see in grief, how we grieve, why we grieve. And that there are so many different reasons, and there really is no hierarchy. There's not, oh, you feel more in this.
Or, oh, you've finally reached bargaining. No, it's not like that. Like, you can get to acceptance and then go right back to anger. Don't worry.
And that, you grieve over so many things because it's just about the loss of futures. So, yes, people grieve just as hard about pets.
Futures are infinite.
Yeah.
That's the problem. This is why grief is something like the older you get, the more most of your life will be about processing grief. Is because futures are infinite, y'all. This goes on forever. My dachshund was 15 when she died. She was wonderful. She was the most perfect dog ever. She was the most wonderful best friend. She really helped me grow as a person, if you can believe that. Like, she really did teach me that it is perfectly okay and safe to love someone unconditionally and be loved unconditionally back. I swear to you, this dog really did teach this to me. And yet, and I've just recently found out that dachshunds normally only live 12 years. What? Because I felt bad. I was like, if only I did better care of her, she would have lived till she was 20. She could have almost been old enough to vote. But no, I didn't do as good a job. And then I find out, wait, they only live till they're 12? Oh, my God. So I got like an extra 3 years already. But do I miss the dog? Heck yeah. Look. Like, I still wish the dog were alive, even though, like that, she would be like the Crypt Keeper dog by now. Do I care? No, because it's fantasy. It's about all the possible futures and the impossible futures. It don't matter. Because I'm still grieving the loss of all my fantasy futures with her. As if she was never going to die. I remember crying and saying to Tom, do you think this is how the Tolkien elves feel about why they don't get attached to humans? Because they live such short lives compared to the elves. But I was trying to cope, so it's fine. Spencer's like, I can call my mom just to cry at her now, and she makes me feel better, and it blows my mind every time. I'm so glad your mom is becoming a better mom the older she gets. It's really awesome when there's like a happy story. Y'all, yeah. I'm like, is this where Tolkien got it? It was like, we love dogs and cats, but they don't live long lives. And so it's like, don't get too attached to that little human. He gonna die in like 60 to 80 years. Like, and you live 2000, like,
and it's not even that it takes that long. You know, I have known people who have been in relationships that only lasted 3 months, and they will grieve it. They're still grieving it 10 years later.
Yeah.
Because it was a bright future that didn't happen. And that's what grief is. It's about, all right, you're not going to get that future anymore. You've got to find new ones.
By the way, we have some serious theatrical thunder going on outside. So if you hear that, it's okay. It's just Thor. I don't know.
But yeah, so it's definitely time for a break.
Okay.
And when we come back, we are going to talk about, we're going to start to talk about coping and the movie Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes, let us talk about coping. Let's get to the meat of this. How do you cope?
And the answer is, surprisingly, go watch Weekend at Bernie's and emulate it.
Because, like, wandering around staring at walls and wallowing, I thought that's how you cope. I tried it.
No.
It was super boring.
Turns out the whole widow walk thing, not a good way to get through grief.
Mm-mm.
It's a way to get stuck in grief. Yeah.
So we're going to talk about how to function and how to, like, actually live a lovely life while you're processing grief. You can have all of it at the same time. You're going to love those. All right. Well, we'll see you back here in approximately 10 minutes. Bibbidi beep. 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 Come out wherever you are.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, BA. How goes the summer? If you're a teacher, when do your kids go back? If you're a parent, when do your kids go back? Here, it's like this middle of this week. Can you believe they're going back in July now? They're doing kind of a, like locally in the county, they're doing kind of a sort of all year round system now, which I do think is actually better for students.
Yeah. I feel though like it's also if you work in the library system, when does summer reading end?
Oh God, 6 years that I do not miss it one bit. Every single summer reading program, I seriously considered resigning. And all your schedule is definitely better for students. I agree. It actually really is better for students. Megan says, I made it. Yay, Megan's here.
Hey, Megan. But yeah, so the first hour we talked about what is grief, what causes it.
Oh, by the way, let me interject, Tom. There is a new poll. Tom has put a new poll in the chat. Let's see the poll. The new poll is favorite way to socialize and play: social gatherings, group board games / video games, playing sports, traveling to a location with friends. And the results of the last poll: favorite way to trigger your emotions, 85% said music, 14% said physical activity, 0% said playing a game, 0% said going to a location. All right. Spent says, I spent the sprint watching videos about doing a no-buy while organizing all my online shopping lists. Very nice.
Is that where like you look up all the stuff you're interested in getting, but you're not actually going to be purchasing anything at the time?
Mm.
And then Megan's like, all my therapists have called me incredibly resilient. It's getting annoying to hear.
Mood. But I mean, honestly, that's really what we're talking about here is emotional resilience. And so what that is not avoiding the feelings or squelching them down, shove them down, eat them. No. None of that. I used to think emotionally resilient people just are not bothered by emotions or something. When I was a teenager, I thought that's what it was. Because that's how it was portrayed, but it is not.
Yeah. Emotional resilience is not stoicism.
No.
In any form. Emotional resilience is about recognizing emotions that you're having, but not letting them make you do something or letting your emotions validate your reality. Like just instead recognizing, that the emotions are simply part of you. They help remind you of things to take care of yourself, but they do not decide what is true and what is false. There's definitely times people can be helpful, tell you something, and it makes you really upset. Emotional resilient people recognize that it's their processing of that new truth that is upsetting them, not that the person telling them is a mean or evil or malicious or anything. And that's what we're talking about emotional resilience. Of, instead of being entirely emotionally based, you recognize the emotions are there to help, but they are not the end all be all.
Also, how we feel does not necessarily reflect the truth of the situation we're in. you can feel suspicious and it not have anything to do with the situation you're in that moment. Like you feel suspicious because of something someone said to you, 6 hours ago. And your brain is just now finally starting to like work through that.
Or no. Let's go over at least my favorite example in any person. Our mother.
I knew you were going there. The most emotionally reactive person I've ever met to this day.
And when was this woman happiest? When, just like, I don't know any other way to really put it, but when she was in the center of a shitstorm. That is when she was happiest.
Because she wasn't waiting for it to happen. It had finally happened. She could relax. And I'm like, do you hear yourself?
And that's, again, showing the emotions do not necessarily tell you the reality of things, but they do tell you about your needs. So, yeah, she didn't need to be anxious anymore because it was in action. It was happening.
Mm-hmm.
The same question Megan has to all her therapists. Like, if I'm so resilient, why do I still have so many problems?
Because everybody has so many problems, Megan. Everybody.
Yes.
Some people do a better job of covering it up or just not expressing their problems, but everybody's got so many problems, particularly right now in the 2020s. Living through an apocalypse, everybody has problems.
As well as when most of the population is quite literally underpaid.
The majority of the population
does not have a quote living wage.
Underpaid. Like they're not, they have to, when you have to make a choice between paying necessary bills such as rent or mortgage and eating, let alone eating healthy, like not like you're eating extravagant. You're not having prime rib every night, but just eating healthy, being able to afford fruits and vegetables and whole grains. Okay. When you are having to make a decision between paying necessary bills such as electricity, water, and mortgage rent, or eating healthy, you are underpaid. Or you have a serious addiction you need to address. Because addictions are expensive, let's be honest.
Yes, hence, the old line that everyone agrees to, which is cocaine is God's way of telling you have too much money.
Yes.
Because it's a really expensive habit.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a bad habit.
I mean, it'll dissolve your nose.
It'll help you make a lot of bad decisions.
It will, very quickly.
In record time.
Oh, yeah. Spence says, ha ha, ouch, I'm your mom. LOL. Oh, thank God the shoes finally dropped. Okay, I can start doing stuff now. Yep, that was pretty much mom. Oh, God. It used to be like, as little as one sentence, you could set her off for like the day or the week. And it was like, ma'am, could you get some awareness of like, you don't have to stay in that emotional state. So every single member of my immediate biological family has at various points been diagnosed at least once, if not multiple times, with clinical depression. And technically, I was diagnosed with clinical depression once. But it turned out I wasn't clinically depressed. I had a hypothyroid. And once I was on the right thyroid medication, the right amount, all of my clinical depression symptoms disappeared because it wasn't clinical depression. It was an underachieving thyroid. Okay. By the way, I've since had a psychiatrist friend of mine told me that particularly when any new female client comes into his office, he always orders a blood draw because literally 1/3 of all of his female clients who come in for depression symptoms, it turned out they had a hypothyroid. A third, a solid third.
And then another third don't have enough vitamin D.
Yes. And another third just have inadequate amounts of vitamin D. And so 2/3 of his female clients do not need antidepressants, it turns out. And we live in South Mississippi. The psychiatrist lives in South Mississippi. So we have sun. And still, I just, well, I'm not saying that that's the problem for any of your loved ones or yourself. I would like to strongly encourage everybody to, like, if they're feeling a little mopey, if they're feeling a little down, they're feeling a little undermotivated, y'all get your blood drawn. Get your TSH, no matter your gender as well. Get your TSH draw, and also get your vitamin D draw, just to see, just in case. Because what if you could solve this problem with just a hormone? Because vitamin D actually isn't. No.
Yes.
Vitamin D is a hormone. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, it's a hormone.
With just either and obviously thyroid medication is a hormone. If with just a hormone you could be fixed, that would be lovely. And then you could then actually deal with your problems. It's so much easier to deal with one's mental problems when one has the appropriate hormones. I'm speaking from the wisdom here. So, yeah. I had both. I have to take both vitamin D and thyroid medication. All my hormones are messed up.
But so how do you get through and past grief? And this has led to us, because we were just talking, we realized randomly, Weekend at Bernie's is actually a really good example of this situation, of just the whole grief process and how your brain is working. Because they realize that their futures that they thought they had were going to be great are now gone, and they've got this weekend stuck with the future that ain't happening as they're trying to figure out a new future. And they've got all these other people coming by, and that's what the entire movie is about, is them trying to find a new future while the old one collapses. And that is what grief actually is. It is, the old future is not going to happen, and you got to figure out a new one. And you are torn in so many different directions, and you're feeling a lot of feels.
I do like that the part of coping with this grief is you throw not one, not two, but 3 parties. That's what I like.
And this is also actually part of it. Glory told me about this study or something years ago of one of the things they noticed of a common behavior in middle-class families.
And upper middle class, lower wealthy.
Of whenever they lost a job, the first thing they did was they went on vacation.
Took the whole family on vacation.
The whole family. And you're like, but you don't know when your next amount of income's coming from. Doesn't this seem wasteful? Turned out this is actually the best emotional way to handle it.
So this is what emotionally resilient people do, and it's very effective because, Tom, I know you want to give the punchline, so go ahead.
Because it gives you a new perspective. It separates you from everything about the past that's no longer going to happen. And so you can play and create new futures.
Also, it's signaling to your brain that you're not in crisis, you're not in panic, you are in party mode, and everything is fine, because you don't party when everything is not fine. At least that's what the back of the brain believes. You only party when things are safe.
Yeah.
So it signals to the back of your brain, the most important part, the lizard part of your brain. It signals, hey, we're totally safe and we're having a good time. And so you can think more effectively about, all right, how do I find another job? Who do I need to network with? Let me, how do I need to approach this? Should I start my own business? Should I contact, A, B, and C? Because you're able to think clearly. Because if you've ever been in a panic, you know how difficult it is to think through while you're panicking.
And you literally, and you see that play out in this movie of essentially one character is the lizard brain that keeps panicking. And one part is the logical brain, as much as we don't think of him as logical, we think of him as acting childish.
And also we don't think of Andrew McCarthy as logical at all.
Yeah. But
they definitely cast against type.
Yeah, but he is the one dragging what's his name? I can't remember that actor's name offhand.
I don't know. I just think of it as the nebbish.
Yeah. Along of, all right, let's find new futures. And the parties are part of how we do this.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the lizard brain's like, no, we must panic more. We need to panic harder. And that will bring things to resolution. It's like, no, panic doesn't. Panic
Mm-hmm.
and anxiety do not lead to function. Oh yeah, that
Okay.
also actually leads me to another part, real
So
quick.
Andrew McCarthy played Larry Wilson, and Jonathan Silberman played Richard Parker.
Yeah, Jonathan Silverman is, but that also led me to the other part. So if you're partying, another neat trick this pulls on you is anxiety and excitement are the same emotion.
Like your brain cannot differentiate.
There is no difference in your brain between excitement and anxiety. As far as your brain is concerned, you act exactly the same. It's just, are you interpreting it as a positive or a negative? That's it.
So it is a wonderful way to hide it from yourself. Is if you're feeling lots of strong anxiety, if you go to a party or you throw a party, you can then tell yourself this is a positive feeling rather than a negative, destructive feeling. And then your brain will believe it, and you will again be able to think clearly and actually figure out where is the anxiety coming from? What does that mean that you need to do to address it? Is somebody causing the anxiety? Is it just a situation? Can the situation be resolved relatively easily? Or is it going to require lots of multi steps? In which case, you could start planning that out at the party while you're still in party mode.
But it's a lot easier to think up solutions when you're excited than when you're anxious.
Yeah, or panicking. BA says, "Oh, I'm totally the person who always panics. Do not depend on me in an emergency situation. I'll be dealing with my own emergency. LOL." Mood and a half.
It is always good to know which your friends are the ones who are calm under pressure and will just, function and take things.
I mean, like, I have to admit, when, all of it hits the fan, that is when I'm calmest. That's when I can think clearly because, yes, just like my mother, I am my mother's daughter. Just like my mother, I'm like, okay, it's finally hit. I don't have to keep waiting for it to happen, the terrible things. And so I can see clearly what needs to be addressed because, if anything, I'm actually more relaxed. I'm not as anxious because it all hit the fan. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I am the calm one in a crisis because finally it all hit the fan. Okay, now we can move forward.
And so that's part of what I want to bring up. Of when you are having grief, it may seem absolutely counterintuitive that the way to really handle the grief is to periodically go out to parties, socialize, and play games.
Mm-hmm.
Because another way to recognize grief is that the opposite of grief is the Buddhist idea of the childlike mind, or the beginner's mind, and beginner's luck, of where you're just doing things to do them and seeing what happens. Who knows, what the result will be, but you're just going to play and see. It's okay if it doesn't work. It's great if it does. We're just going to find out.
Right.
The opposite is grief, where you knew what was going to happen and it is now never going to happen. And you are stuck there. That there is no future at this point. You are at an impasse.
Spence says, when it hits the fan, brain goes, "Oh, I have a checklist for this." Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But and I want to give credit where credit is due. I learned this trick, if you will, because I definitely deal with quite a bit of anxiety. For the most part, because I'm neurodivergent, and it's just anxiety inducing to have to live in this neurotypical world. Like, this is not a world I'm welcomed in. And so I have a lot of anxiety from that, but I probably would have anxiety, period, just because I come from anxious people. And Gen Xers, my Gen Xer friends, who are all slightly older than me, when I was like in my late teens, early 20s, they taught me this. When you are sad, when you are anxious, when you're emotionally in a place you don't want to be, you throw a party. And and then I'm like, I can't throw a party. I don't have any money. I'm like, that's why I'm sad. I don't have. And they're like, no problem. And that was where I talked last time about my then girlfriend, who was I think like 4 to 6 years older than me. Said, we'll just pull our groceries and we'll have cookouts. And she would keep track of the grocery store circulars, and definitely anytime like cookout food was on sale, like ground beef, chicken, sausage, things that go really well. And remember, her father had bought a literal pallet of charcoal briquettes, so she just kept sneaking out 5 and 10 pound sacks of this, and was able to do this for like 9 months before he finally noticed, why is it like sinking real quick? Anyway, that we would have a little party of just like me, my then boyfriend, my girlfriend, her husband. And she would, but like, people would ask, what are you going to do? And it's like, oh, we're having a cookout. And they were like, oh, if I bring, a big, huge bowl of potato salad, can I come? And that's where my girlfriend came up with the idea of it's $10 and a bottle of liquor. And you come to the cookout. Like, essentially, we could cover the food. Because, again, she was keeping track of the circulars. And then the money helped pay for the food. And also, let's be honest, it was a party of the late 90s, early 2000s. This is when this was going on. And there was, I was underage, but there was plenty of liquor at her house. And so, yeah, it was a lot of fun. And people would play games. We'd literally play video games. People would play, I don't know, they're not board games. What is charades? But those kind of
games.
Party games. Thank you. Yeah. Party games. And the feeling of anxiety was still there, but I then interpreted it as excitement rather than negativity of like, oh, I'm so anxious, I can barely like stand myself.
And so instead of the anxiety building up the stressors, chemicals in your body, instead the excitement actually led to more euphoric chemistry going on in your body.
Which again actually helped protect me from not experiencing actual depression, the brain chemicals of depression, versus the rest of my family who did not have Gen Xer friends, who were seriously the Gen Xers, the way they used to be in the 90s and the early 2000s, the way all Gen Xers solved all their problems was to have a party. They were not, turns out, not actually that wrong on this.
Turns out what they learned from the 80s movies,
yes,
was more functional than you'd guess.
Yes, but that was how they solved all problems. That's how I ended up at all those pasture parties. Was other Gen Xers were throwing, like all the food service people would in town, all the Gen Xer food service kids would throw a pasture party where you literally drive out to some farmer's pasture who did not necessarily consent to this, and you party with every car's parked, and everybody just sits on their car and drinks and mingles. Not everybody drinks. Like, I wasn't drinking much back then. But, and you hang out with the sleepy cows. And the farmer is sleeping way off at his house, at her house, whatever. And you're mingling and you're having fun. Because also networking with people. What did everybody do at these? Like, these were Gen Xers. These were not highfalutin people. The answer was, because you're feeling anxious. And now you're trying to interpret it as excitement. You're then talking about what's making you anxious. Oh, I'm really stressed about my job. Oh, my boss keeps trying to like cop a feel. And it's so hard not to take a cleaver to his hand. Like, it's seriously stressing me out. The temptation is real, y'all. And there's like people going, well, we need to solve this problem. And, people are there networking and helping you solve your problems, whether it's finding a new job. What?
And giving you more ideas.
Yeah, whether it's finding a new job or figuring out other solutions. Like, maybe as soon as you see him coming into, the kitchen, put down the cleaver and go start washing lettuce, So at the worst, you just throw a head of lettuce at him, Useful tips, y'all. So that was, like I said, the Gen Xer idea of you have any kind of problem, have a party, was not necessarily bad. And like, I will say this, for Gen Xer parties, they tended to be low cost Because it was like bring your own liquor, bring your own food or whatever. Like Gen Xers were understanding of like, hey, nobody got money.
It's what we also just call potluck.
Yeah. So Spence says some of the most fun parties I've ever had were when we were in the biggest crises. Exactly, because you got all that energy. Megan says I'm always anxious, even at a party. LOL. Partly because I have social anxiety too.
And that is where it is good, though, to have friends that you go to parties with who know how to do social lubrication, of having a wingman friend, essentially, to help you, with those conversations.
What I liked about Gen Xer parties was it was perfectly acceptable to sit quietly in a corner. And people would just, when they were feeling quieter, they'd then go sit next to you and go, so, what's going on? You about to leave? You just arrived? You don't know anybody? Because I can introduce you. Like it was nice that like they understand, like, have a similar vibe. But also like the party would essentially come to me. Because like if I don't know anybody at a party, I am suddenly shy. Versus when I know everybody, it's like I just take my turn, like a little bee going to every flower. Hey, how are you? How are you? How are you? How's what's catching up, and then going to the next flower. Spence says it's not as fun throwing a party when I'm not on a $10 budget anymore. LOL. Yes. Mood.
But yeah, like some of the fun was figuring out, okay, how do we have a party with very little? I mean, that's part of how Gloria and I fed ourselves after our mother passed away. We were living in a friend's house they weren't using at the time. But it was stretching their resources just to keep the electricity and water on there for us. And I was making like $25 to $50 a week. Mm-hmm. And we had to survive plus have gas on that. It was hard. So part of what we did was we started throwing parties and started having potlucks and having our friends bring over food as well. And essentially that supplemented our food budget.
Yeah, because people would leave their food there. They knew that we were kind of struggling. They're like, do you want me to leave? I'm like, oh, I would love it if you leave your food. And so it would feed us for the rest of the week.
But essentially, we paid for it by providing the social space.
Mm-hmm.
By, being the host and making sure, as good hosts of a party, we then made sure everyone else, was introduced. We socially lubricated. We mentioned when we knew people had common interests or backgrounds.
Yeah,
so we had everyone had an easier time socializing, that there weren't these awkward silences as much.
Yeah, like I had studied how geishas actually, like, because a geisha's real job was as party hostess. And I had read and watched some documentaries about what is the actual historical and modern job of a geisha. And found out it's a party hostess, y'all. It's a party hostess in this really cool antiquated outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can dress up. And yeah, like the job of geisha is to understand culturally all of their country, Japan, as well as party games, to have like an incredible catalog of knowledge of how to play like a bajillion party games and how to essentially keep the conversation lubricated, how to always keep the conversation going. And I had like read up just enough that it was like, I feel like I kind of practice this. I kind of want to practice this at parties. And Tom was like, then let's invite some people over who don't know each other and let's see how it goes. We just won't tell anybody that's what you're practicing is how to be an American geisha. It's hilarious. So that's what I did until I found a full-time job at the library. And where then I kind of still kept doing my job. Anyway, there's a whole nother
you did. And like I was literally earlier today watching a video from a YouTuber called Religion for Breakfast. Mostly they discussed things about the history of religions. But this one in particular, he was talking with two doctors, two PhD doctorates, about religion and music, and how there's a new theory that so far seems to be proving out that humans co-evolved religion and music together, because music does a really neat trick that has shown out around the world in every culture, which means it's just basic to humans, which is when humans do activities together in unison. So we sing together, we clap together, we march in time together. Any activity where we just behave in unison, speaking keeping rhythm, or any of that, we suddenly bond very fast. In one particular study showed that over like 9 months or 11 months, every group in this thing, was socially bonded, very close. But the ones who did music, who were in a choir together, bonded within the first month, compared to all the other ones that took much more time and many more interactions and essentially more one-on-one conversations. So like that's part of why at parties we have music. So we can move together synchronized, so we can sing together synchronized. Who doesn't love singing the chorus?
Yes.
A good party has good party songs, and all good party songs have choruses that are memorable
Yep.
and fun to sing.
Have a real banger of a chorus. Yes.
That's part of how you socialize, and that's how you develop these friendships. And that is why, yes, when you are in a grief situation, the next step is to go socialize and go into a situation where you can play.
Mm-hmm.
Because play is new solutions for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how you find them. And yeah, it is absolutely antithetical to everything they talk about with grief, of essentially you're just wallowing there, you're going to be numb, you're going to be angry, things of like, all right, but be angry at a physical activity. Go bowling with friends. You can really be angry at those pins with a bowling ball, and no one is upset at you.
I actually attended a couple Gen Xer parties where somebody had someone very close just pass away. Like essentially, you know how funerals are multi-generational? This was like the after party to the funeral, and it was for mostly younger people and a couple of the older folks who didn't want to go home yet that day. And so, yeah, there's like definitely a contingent that are sitting there kind of sad in the corner. And then everybody else is having a regular party, but, everybody's taking a turn sitting with, the sad Gen Xer and then maybe one or two other folks, who also knew the deceased. And, listening to the stories being told, talking about it. And then, after like a half hour, 45 minutes, excusing themselves to go mingle with the people who were, maybe more boisterous. Because it was like a regular party, but then it was okay to also be sad in it.
Yeah.
And I felt like this is so functional that you're allowed to be sad at a party. And the party still goes on and it's all okay. Everybody's allowed to feel how they feel. It's just like where in the facility, the bolsters part is usually like outside, and like the inside living room is where the sad folks are and where they're talking about their stories and their memories and laughing a little too, because it's still a party, y'all. It's still a party. So you're going to tell the funny stories about the deceased. It's part of that grieving process. And at the end of the party, because often I like to stay to the end of parties and help clean up. I feel like that's sometimes, especially when I was young and very socially awkward, I felt like that was the time when we're all cleaning up together, that where I made like real friendships, where I made real social connections with folks, was during the cleanup process. Because I don't mind helping clean up. I know a lot of people don't like it because they always leave the party quickly. But I really don't mind, partly because it's kind of fun. You're doing this activity together with a bunch of other people, some of whom you don't know at all, and building friendships and chatting, and you can have more meaningful conversations that way with people.
And getting to finish those stories you heard.
Yes.
But what really happened there? Like you do get to bond at a closer level. But the earlier elements of the party do help you very much quickly, the normal bond with these people that otherwise they would not feel as comfortable having these discussions with you. Also,
Spence says, I also practice that skill. Oh, I'm glad it wasn't just me. Hostess Haley is a persona at this point, but one that doesn't make me feel like a liar. Exactly. I love playing hostess, even when it's not my party, if they need one. And Megan says, I have been to only 2 parties in my lifetime. I really didn't hang with a party type crowd. Yeah, I really wasn't a party kind of person. I wasn't raised as a party person, sorta. Our parents held more intimate gatherings. It was only through my, then girlfriend that I got invited to all these Gen Xer parties, and she threw so many. And then, like after that, I then really I enjoyed throwing them because the way the Gen Xers throw parties is definitely less stressful and less requiring so much preparation than these more formal parties like my parents threw, which, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you. So, that's what I found out, like, oh, I can do this. This is Gen Xer parties were definitely low stress, low cost.
Yes. And
But
they
like
also,
prom, you went to a lot more parties.
oh
Like
yeah.
you seem to know way more party people than me.
And that is where also, yeah, there are certain types of crowds for these parties. One of them being, it is in general often mostly low income, because parties are a good way of blowing off steam. Of You get to work with, you're moving with other people, you're bonding with them, and then you can both, have your gripes, you can feel heard. Like, often that is what people who are dealing with their grief want most, is to just feel like they're heard, that
Yes.
they're valid, and that they have not been um, socially separated from others.
Yes.
Because those are often the thoughts and feelings you're actually feeling inside when you're dealing with grief.
Like, yes, have I been cast out?
And so that's again where these parties and socializing, and there's a lot of different ways to socialize. You can go find groups that are meeting up to just chat at the local bookstore or the library.
Mm-hmm.
Most churches have a lot of different social groups that use the facilities during the week when there's no religious stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
um, and this is a good way to help. Also, another part of the reason why I mentioned parties being ideal is another aspect we have noticed, and has been proven out about emotions. If you want to process emotions faster, move your hands. Whether that's playing video games, crocheting, playing a sport, dribbling a ball,
Playing an instrument.
playing an instrument. Move your hands, and your brain will move through those emotions at the same speed. If you're not moving your hands much, your brain will go through those emotions much slower,
Yep.
at a glacial pace.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, there is this odd connection between literal hand movement and feet movement, to a little bit lesser degree, and your brain's thinking processes and emotional expression. So, again, part of that play and figuring out new futures, and, moving on to, new presents that you want to go to, is physical activity. That's why I actually mentioned about playing sports and gatherings and video games and just travel, is they all involve physical movement, and those all help.
Spence says last two parties I went to were at the bookstore downtown. One was right after my grandma died, and it was real weird actually, because I was very much in my grief, and one of my friends was super unwilling, or at least it felt as though he was super unwilling to participate in that part of the steam blowing off.
Mm.
And true, some people are kind of afraid of grief. We are honestly always
Yeah.
expecting today's show to be a low viewer count, because grief is if someone has not been forced to experience grief, like the kind of grief you just can't escape, like say the death of a close loved one, they are often very shy of it, or, oh, that doesn't apply to me, nothing will ever happen in my life. Like, okay. Megan says, oh yeah, now that you mention it, there was a stereotype to who throws parties. And Spence says, my parents never did any kind of hosting. My mom would have friends come over on her days off in the morning for coffee, but it was like one friend, and they usually had a cup and then left together.
But
Yeah.
and also that does, sort of bring me to the next subject that we will definitely be going into a lot more in the next hour, but might as well since it's sort of a decent segue of talking about parties and who throws parties and how you have parties. Coping mechanisms of like part of how Gen X parties work also was people, often drank alcohol. And as long as, you do not come from a family where alcohol is a dangerous situation. Just like there's a lot of other drugs that most people, a lot of people could try drugs and they can enjoy it, but it's not going to be it doesn't become part of their personality. And then there's those who are like, oh no, I already know. I've already seen my uncle or I've seen my cousin, or it's like, nope, I don't touch it. It's like, okay, we find something else. But it helps lower that anxiety level so we can start talking about what it is that's causing the anxiety, what's causing the stressor. So you'd always see these parties, they start out kind of quiet. People would start sipping. Most people really don't drink in excess. It's just they're literally using it as a way to calm themselves so they can then converse the way they want to. That's the reason why they often called alcohol as a social lubricant. But it's just finding a thing. Like for some people, it is literally exercise till they are a bit exhausted. And that exhaustion keeps their brain from over revving so they can then process their stuff. And that's why there's plenty of people who like to exercise as a group. And then they
group sports.
And then group sports, and then they hang out and have conversations afterwards because now their brain cannot over rev. Right. There's a lot of ways that we cope and we find ways to help make ourselves more. Coping mechanisms are just a way to make yourself more functional in the world we live in. And there's good ways to cope where you are more functional, and then there's dysfunctional ways to cope, and it's the same thing but it's used in a bad way of it now isolates you, it now feeds the anxiety, it now,
like any coping mechanism can be a positive or a negative.
Yeah,
I think is what Tom is trying to say. Of like any coping mechanism can be functional or dysfunctional depending on how it's used, when it's used, and if it's actually being used to self-isolate. So it just depends.
But there's a lot of chemicals even out there that people don't even realize or think of as coping mechanisms, but are very much used as coping. Nicotine, when it's first used, is a vasodilator, and so it actually has a relaxing effect on you because all your blood vessels expand and you have this sudden rush and bit of relaxation. But then as you use it more, it tightens up all your blood vessels and it makes you a bit more anxious. And so that's why you see a lot of people who just smoke a little bit and then they finish because they've gotten the part they want and it's not making them feel any better and they'll stop.
Like hence the person who says, oh, I only smoke at parties.
Yeah.
That's definitely that's the kind of person. Not that like that's the only way people who are smoking tobacco are doing. I'm not saying like they only do
or
it at
vaping
parties.
Or any of it.
Like when you hear people say like, oh, I only drink at parties or I only smoke at parties, it's often what they're really trying to say is I only do a little bit till I get the effect I'm looking for. I'm not doing it all the time. Like I'm not doing it at home by myself because what would be the point? Like that's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, like I have so many cigars and cigarillos that have aged nicely, but I haven't really smoked or used because I use them in social situations where they give me an effect that I enjoy. It helps enhance for me the social experience, but if there's not a social experience to do it with, it doesn't really do anything for me.
Yep. Spence says if I had a friend over, it was a 20-minute maximum before someone was like, why don't you guys go outside or go for a walk? Sounds like someone else's social anxiety talking.
Yeah. But yeah, what we really keep coming back to is humans are social creatures. We've now realized and kind of proven out in every way scientists can test it out. We're social creatures. We became human through socializing. So often the answer to a situation is another kind of socializing.
It is possible to have, quote, those kind of party atmosphere, like online, um, like our Sunday Fun Day, where everybody just hangs out in the Discord voice chat, um, or hangs out after a live stream in StreamYard. It is possible to have a get together online, whether it's because your friends are like 1,000 miles away, or the people available to socialize with live in various areas of the world, and or you're just trying to quarantine. All those reasons are absolutely valid, but you can still have a bit of a party atmosphere, um, and you can invite people. Many more people are now more comfortable using video chat, either on their phone or on their computer, and you can still have a party atmosphere, especially if people are prepared ahead of time of like, sure, to like make something fun to drink. Even if you're having non-alcoholic, you mix a couple delicious juices together and some carbonated water. That stuff's fantastic.
Or you learn how to mix teas and juices, or teas and a few sodas. Like, you'd be surprised what different kinds of infusions kind of make for fun drinks.
Yeah. But you can still have that sort of socializing.
Or you can also do what I've seen occasionally of where, essentially before a social gathering, like, you plan ahead a week or whatever, everyone get these supplies and we'll all try, this new recipe or this new item, this new, what is it, the pterodactyl, like people said? A new pleasure.
A new pleasure! A new pleasure!
And you get to all try it together.
Yeah.
And you get to share that experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you're not in the same room, you get to share the same taste. You get to see what it's like. You get to compare notes and just socialize. They're like cats of a family that only drinks at our family reunion. Are those the people who are like, no, we need a new one next year?
Spence says, we're both clicking. Turns out, in retrospect, certain coping mechanisms in my family weren't socially acceptable yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, finding out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And what's coping that helps you be more functional, not less.
So here's the thing. You can only process your grief when you feel safe. So again, I want to repeat, parties are one of those spaces that signals to the back of your brain, oh, I'm in a safe space because it's safe to party. Otherwise this party wouldn't be here. All these people would have showed up if it wasn't a safe place. Also, there's a bunch of people here. I'm not alone. So if predators come, I will not have to deal with this on my own. I have safety in numbers. And that also signals to the back of the brain, we are in a safe space. So when we're in a safe space, we can actually process grief. So there's other ways to establish a safe space.
Yeah.
There's absolutely plenty of ways. And if you think in the back of your head, when do I feel safe? Maybe you feel safe with a certain person, or you feel safe in certain buildings, or you feel safe doing certain activities. But especially if you are consciously aware that you have some grief you're working through, whether it's the loss of a scholarship, it's the loss of a person in your life, a loss of a relationship, or it's time to start a new chapter of your life. Maybe you're graduating college or graduating with your doctorate, or you're leaving a company to start working at a new company. All of those things require grief to process through in order to move forward in your life. And so think about, where do I feel safe? With whom do I feel safe? Is there any activities where I feel safe? and try to spend more time doing those so that the back of your brain can work on processing the loss of all these futures that you can never have now. And trust me, at a certain point, I'm willing to go out on a limb and say, even if you're not aware that you're processing grief, you're still probably processing grief. Just because, hi, everybody now lives in the 2020s, and these times are wild. So everybody is having to grieve the loss of how they thought their lives would go, that things will never be the same. Masks are going to be something that we will always be consciously aware of from now on. More vaccines, truly the age of, they're working on all sorts of vaccines now.
They're actually now fairly confident they will create a common cold vaccine.
Yeah, especially because even just 1 year without most people getting colds has really shown the trauma from all these contagious diseases. When, essentially there was almost a whole year where nobody was getting these, and they saw the change, even the change in babies who did not get colds in their first year, and how their brain development is so much faster. It's going great. Like, oh yeah, we need to address this as a species. So there's a loss of the way things were. When you knew how to live your life with the way things were, and that is never going to be your future now. So everybody on the planet is now dealing with this grief. Parties will never be the same. Restaurants will never be the same. Lifestyle will never be the same like it was in the 20 teens. It will never go back. And so moving forward requires processing the grief over the loss of what will never have been. And so that I venture to say everybody's having to process grief. Because every couple months you're going to realize there's like a new thing that you always loved and that you can never do it the same way again because the world changed and it's never going back because it's just unsafe to go back to that way.
And after 3 years in a row, there is not going to be a hot anything summer.
Now with monkeypox. No. Anyway, Kat says, my niece has had RSV, COVID, and bronchitis in her 1 year life so far. The doctor said developmentally she is 9 months instead of 13 months, which is her age. Yeah, that is what we learned. They used to suspect it, but they couldn't prove it because there was never a time where you could just isolate humans for like a whole year. Nobody's going to agree to that, let alone their baby. Because what if the baby developmentally was behind because of the lack of lots of human contact? So they were never going to do this experiment, although they talked about wanting to do it. And now we've all inadvertently been part of this big, huge social experiment. And we now know that contagious diseases actually delay brain development in the young. So we really do as a society need to address this. And they're looking at vaccines because of all the new developments made in vaccine technology, which will be good for everybody in the long term, but in the short term, it's a real rough, rocky road right now. Because we have just enough knowledge to know how dangerous things are without any solutions.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of grief to process. How about we do another sprint, and when we come back, what are we going to talk about, Tom?
We're going to continue talking about coping strategies. Circling back around, I also want to talk about disassociation and other mental strategies we come up with to cope. Like, it's not always external how we cope. And just how we handle the situation of grief.
Cool. All right, well, we'll see y'all in approximately 10 minutes. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep. Bibbidi beep. Love that side eye. All right, Tom.
All right, so for the next part, we're going to talk about fictional characters, just in case.
Not this yet? No.
Well, yeah, that's two.
I can not do it.
How about first, though, you want to talk about the polls?
Yes, polls. Okay. So we have a current poll up. What is your favorite coping strategy? Food/drink, learning new activity. That is not how you spell the word activity, but okay. Favorite old activity, or hanging with friends. And then the previous polls, Tom completed. Favorite way to socialize and play. 44% said group board games/video games. 33% said social gatherings. 22% said travel to a location with friends. 0% said playing sports.
This is not a sporting crowd.
It's totally fine. Says, I attempted to learn how to buy a new couch. I need a cushier couch. I agree. I don't know your couch, and I agree you need a better couch. In my family, the women collect couches the way other women collect shoes.
Yeah.
Are you having a rough day? Let's go couch shopping. That's a real thing.
I mean, but you have to admit, there's a certain fun and entertainment to just going to one of those furniture stores,
just
the large ones.
Yeah, just go sit in every couch.
And just try different ones and see what different possibilities are.
Yep. And what are the prices? What is the warranty on this? Yeah, it's fun.
What's the new anti-stain magic that is now being offered? Right. How effective is it?
Yep.
And how realistic are I don't know what you call them, but essentially classic accidents in the home, and how realistic do they look? Because they buy these plastic, I would almost call them pieces of art, that look like, red wine mid-spill, or, breakfast freshly, fallen on the couch. And these are all hand-painted items that just look so real. And it's just fun to examine of like, wow, look at this. But yeah, couch hunting is fun. At least it can be. So I guess, yeah, first. So I posted a link in the chat. And to show y'all, there's a lot of different wheels of emotion. Most of them are just negative wheels of emotion. They've got happy and everything else is negative. And that is not how humans work, unless they're very dysfunctional. But I like this one that was half positive, half negative. And really they're counterparts of whatever the bottom is the positive form and the top is the negative form. So sad and peaceful can look very similar.
I thought it was sad versus joyful. I thought they were across from each other.
Oh, you're right. Thanks, my
I love you. Welcome to your neurodivergence.
I know.
I'm here to be your guide.
Yes. After 2 hours, it does get a little hard for my brain. Like, I need more caffeine and dopamine.
Yeah, I've noticed. I wanted to show mine because I've got it enlarged so people could see it more clearly from the screen.
Yeah. And that's actually what I was going to do, was just...
Yeah, joyful versus sad. Peaceful versus scared. Powerful versus mad.
And you can really see how opposite, how,
I really
we,
want to draw attention here. I don't feel like any of the sad ones are complete without having bored here.
yes.
When I grew up, people used to complain about people being bored. Oh, how dare you be bored of this amazing world? But boredom is not just an idle feeling, it is a light form of sadness. So it's like telling people, how dare you be sad? It's like, I have every reason to be sad. F off. But I wanted you to see how when someone says they're bored, what they're really saying is, I'm slightly sad, which that is very valid. And we need to explore that of, well, why are you sad? When children say they're bored, it's like, well, why are you sad? I think it's very helpful to children are young, they're inexperienced, and to really help them identify their emotions and also what is at the root of emotions.
And note, often what people will say, instead of, saying they're bored, they may better recognize what they're feeling inferior. They do not feel
Mm-hmm.
up to the task.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, when we're feeling nurturing or content or thoughtful, intimate, peace, it's peace.
But you cannot, but truly showing how, the opposites, you cannot feel lonely when you are feeling playful and excited and energetic. They really are the opposite ends of the same thoughts. And that's part of what I wanted to bring it up of sometimes, especially if you're not doing well, such as, going through the grief process, which can make it harder to think, because we've got so many emotions going on at the same time. Sometimes it helps to look at these kinds of wheels of emotion and see what is at the heart of them. And then where do you want to go? So is it that, you want to feel excited, which means you need to find something that makes you joyful? Versus, are you trying to just find more inner peace? Then you need to find things that will help you feel more content or more intimate situations with others will help, give you that peaceful feel. It is a surprisingly effective, but in the moment, it's hard to think of these of, I'm not feeling up to this. Well, what should I do then? And it's like, I don't know. That's why I'm stuck here. I do like looking at these wheels of emotion to better address all right, so here's where I am. What's the opposite? What is it I would actually want? When I think about it now, what are the ones prior that have given me those experiences?
Mm-hmm.
So it's another way to kind of get unstuck from a thought process or a situation. Although really, look, on that blue section, all I'm hearing in my head is, Thor sad. But also, same though applies for, since a lot of our people here are writers, of when you're trying to better express your character and understand where they are, look at these wheels of emotion and see what they may exterior be showing, and then what that means the interior. Like, what is it they're willing to say, but what does that mean about how are they feeling? It's much easier to get a character to just say they're feeling miserable versus it feels weird when they say that they are depressed. Like, just recognizing this is my depression emotions of that's more of what they're feeling versus, they can more easily recognize I'm miserable. I'm not feeling up to this task. And it's like, so the character was sad. What are they going to do to change this? Yeah, I don't actually have a good way for the segue I wanted to do. which was a thinking of when people get stuck in the grief process. That is where you start seeing them doing on behaviors that are not actually productive to their end goals. Instead, they are productive to staying in the past. Whenever you see a vengeance story, most of the time, the vengeance story is simply about addressing the part of the future is never going to happen. It doesn't actually get them to a new future. It's just about, let me stay in the past longer by doing this vengeance. Occasionally, it is about having a new future of you need to do vengeance to make sure they do not come for you again later and cause even further disruption. But a lot of these stories, we see more of these characters that are just stuck on vengeance because they don't want to leave the past. They don't want to come up with a new future. And that's where you see, these characters get stuck. And why, people are trying to talk about, like, this vengeance is not functional. This does not in any way improve your life. And that future you wanted is gone. Vengeance doesn't bring it back. This is part of why Gloria and I have such a hard time with so many Hollywood directors paying homage to The Searchers, which is the weirdest, most boring story about vengeance with people who just didn't want to be part of that future to begin with. They drag back this woman who's like, I don't want to be part of your society anymore. I want to be with these people. They treat me better. And they just can't comprehend this. They're like, no, you have to be part of ours. And the second the chance she gets, she leaves again. Because they are just stuck in the past. They want to still create that future they had planned. And that's where we see, coping strategies being maladaptive. That the whole vengeance strategy of, well, then we're going to kill those people who are giving her a better life. She's not going to participate in the future you want. Now again, yeah, grief makes people do crazy things because they're not yet ready to go to a future. Because often another part of grief that I did want to mention is what it is at the heart of grief is that future we no longer have gave us a purpose or meaning to our lives. That is what is actually causing the upset, emotional spillover difficulties, and we are now in the grief process, is we do not have an immediate replacement for that purpose or meaning to our life. But once you give someone once they give someone, or that person finds a new meaning or purpose, you will see a lot of their grief disappears. What is it, why is Glory, still feeling grief about her mother's passing? Because there's nothing there to replace that person to share that kind of excitement who knew her and validated it in the same way her mother did. That's why, there's still some grief. There's still those emotions there. The same with, Cassie, her, our dachshund, of, someone who just genuinely loved us with all her heart, showed her excitement for us every time. I mean, bravo to Cassie's capacity to every time be excited at 100% plus whenever she see either of us.
Oh my God. I was sure one day she was going to wag that tail off.
No kidding. Like,
She did break her tail once, y'all. She broke her tail. She sprained it. She sprained her tail. We had to take her to the vet because she was screaming in pain, but she wouldn't quit wagging it. She just scream and wag. It was awful. Well, it was really wag and then scream. Wag and scream. And it was like, stop wagging it and it won't hurt as much. The vet is closed. She just was such a joyful being that even it was worth it to wag it even through the pain. Like, stop wagging it.
So yeah, we had to do two or 3 weeks of crate where we couldn't get her excited about anything. We had to just be as low energy as possible to try to keep her energy low, because otherwise
the tail wouldn't reset.
And like, a lot of people have had dachshunds know this one of like, if you have lost track of your dachshund and you cannot find them, all you do is in a happy tone call out their name, and you will hear the drums.
Where's the thumping? The thumping of the dachshund tail. It's on something. It's thump, 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 like a beat coming for you. Usually under a blanket.
We do not have anyone like that in our lives right now that could replace, to give, and helps validate us in that way. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, whenever we encounter those ones where it would be wonderful to have her, we still have that grief.
Yep.
But that is where, grief
that's why, like, the death of your mother or your father, at least the person who was most like that.
Your primary caregiver.
Yeah.
The one who really took care of you.
That is why they say you just have to walk around with a hole in your heart. It's because you can't replace them. Because you have so much history with that person, especially in your formative years, usually. And they're irreplaceable. And versus with other people, with relationships that end, you can eventually replace them. You can have other romantic relationships, other friendships, but you can't replace that primary caregiver in your life because you can't be raised again. And that emotional intimacy, you're never going to have that exact kind of emotional intimacy with anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's why at a certain point, you just have to be okay with walking around with a metaphorical hole in your heart. Or if you experience migraines, maybe an actual hole in your heart.
Especially if you're a woman.
See me after the show and I'll tell you all about that scientific research.
But yeah, I wanted to, in this last part, also talk about the coping strategies when they're functional versus dysfunctional, and just the many forms they take. At the very beginning of the show, Gloria was talking about numbness. Of if you're not safe, it's not time to process those emotions. That is actually a coping strategy your body is doing for you because you need to survive.
Yep.
There's nothing inherently bad. There's no, emotions are not morality. They are without morals. They are simply experiences. They are the ways your body and mind have to tell you vital information. Of you are missing this, you need this. Anxiety says you're not feeling safe. You need to change things to let yourself know you are safe. That is why one of the things that help anxiety is physical firm touch. Having someone, or actually they found out even something, give you a firm hug reduces anxiety because your body now knows there's something around here with the strength to give that pressure. That is, emotions do not dictate reality. They just tell you your needs and wants, and try to encourage you to address these. Just like pain encourages you not to step on something that is broken in your body. Give it time to heal so it doesn't hurt as much. It can become dysfunctional if the pain lasts, too long and it doesn't know that thing's healed. Then we actually have physical therapies and other strategies to kind of help the body know, don't worry about that, that's fine. But not just numbness, but even disassociation, of where you just don't notice that part of your life as much. People, in the past, at least when we were growing up, it was like, no, you can't disassociate at all. You have to stay here. That was the whole point of Fight Club.
Oh, God.
But also in Fight Club, it was noticing that his disassociation had reached a truly, malevolent, negative form of where he just wasn't dealing with his life.
Wow.
I I'm probably one of the few people. I actually prefer Tyler Durden's character in the book, because in the book, Tyler Durden's only purpose in existence was to help the main character function again and function in his life. And so, unlike the movie, Tyler created a situation that he wouldn't be able to avoid. He couldn't disassociate his way out of it. And the difference is, in the book, none of the materials he had made and set up in the basements of all these buildings were going to work, because Tyler at least could recognize he was so bad at making these things. He purposely had him build what he is worst at. And so, yeah, they were all dysfunctional and didn't do anything, but he couldn't disassociate. He had to actually address it. He couldn't avoid it any longer. And at that point, Tyler's like, I'm leaving. This is what I was here for. You're fine. You've got a social group now. You've got a life. Don't worry. I made sure to wipe down everything. There's no
fingerprints. There's nothing coming back. Don't worry.
I've had all that removed. Tyler was actually trying to be functional in the story.
Mm-hmm.
You have become so numb and avoided everything in your life and disassociated from everything. You have no friends, no life, no meaning, no purpose. Well, then here, let me give you all of those.
I will give you all of it at once.
Yeah.
Good luck.
And so, that's actually why I like the ending in the book of this character wasn't malevolent. This character was just doing everything they could figure out to get this person functional again.
Mm-hmm.
But but disassociation is not necessarily maladaptive. It's just like that numbness. It is, you're trying to be functional at the time. But if you then never process your emotions, you never find new meaning or purpose, it is dysfunctional.
So that is my issue. So for instance, I always grew up, we never had enough money. We didn't have enough food.
Yeah.
Growing up. We moved a lot because my parents couldn't pay the rent so much of the time. When I say we didn't have money, I mean, I am not just saying, oh, we only had off-brand sneakers. No, I mean, we really did not have adequate money to live. And this was after they started whittling away at welfare and food stamps and stuff. So our family suffered a lot. So I started working babysitting at the age of 11, working part-time, doing that. And honestly giving the majority of my money to my parents to help cover rent. So my problems were of survival based versus those of people who grew up with a family with a bit more income, more middle class, such as the social problems of not having brand shoes in a materialistic world and maybe not having the Lisa Frank notebook or Trapper Keeper. While I was aware of these problems because all of my friends were of higher income than me, I was not as concerned because I was still just trying to get adequate food and trying to, have any clothes, because it's hard to go to school without clothes, or all my pants had holes in the thighs because I had walked the fabric away. There was literal huge holes, the size of softballs in both legs. So I could not relate very well to, what I would call middle class problems. However, I observed it a lot in my friends and counterparts. And it was something that I really noticed is the problem or the advantage of being middle class, depending how you want to look at it, is you've got enough money that you never have to deal with your problems if you really don't want to. You can afford to be distracted. You can afford to not have to deal with your problems versus when you are at the bottom of the crab bucket, just trying to get enough and not be eaten yourself. You have to deal with your problems at least so that you can be functional enough to be able to work and be able to juggle school and work as well as your family life, which is disintegrating because your parents are both dysfunctional alcoholics who are like highly undermedicated and are both bipolar. So juggling my parents' manic and depressive phases while also cooking for my family. I was the primary person. By the time I was in middle school, I was the primary person making dinner every night.
Mm-hmm.
And also juggling a full-time public school schedule. It was a lot. And, so I had to be functional. I could not afford to not process my grief. And then I would see all these middle-class folks. And they just don't ever have to process their problems. And I marveled at this, that you could just still be triggered by grandma's death 20 years later because you have done zero to work through your grief. It is as fresh 20 years later as the day she passed. What is that about? And realizing it's about being able to afford other things to distract you, that you don't have to be super functional because you're not that close to living under a bridge like we were, like I felt I was all the time growing up.
I mean, and we all who saw this happen in real time during the spring of 2020, as so many people were getting divorces because they could no longer avoid each other, and they were stuck in the same house. Like versus it turned out how many people were going to bars and other places just to avoid their spouse and dealing with stuff.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden now after just 3 weeks being with each other, they're like, and we're getting a divorce after 10 years. They're like, 3 weeks, nope,
20 years. There were people I knew who'd been married 20 and 30 and 40 years who were 3 weeks in lockdown, and then now they were filing for divorce. And I'm like, dang, could you not have sat in your car or the garage? Like, just make a little bar out there. Like, if that's what you need, like, but I mean, like, not that, like, people who don't want to be married shouldn't stay married. Like, not that. It's just more like, you've gotten this far without dealing with your problems in your marriage. Why start now? Like, it's just truly this seems like middle class problems. Because, like, they had succeeded for decades avoiding each other and their marital problems, and 3 weeks in lockdown, and that's it. And I mean, like, we knew so many people at the start of this pandemic who just honestly, it started the first week of lockdown. We started hearing about divorces.
Yeah.
The very first, like 4 days in lockdown, and they're like, we're getting divorced. Like, what? Was it a real marriage anyway then?
They had never gotten to even really know the other person. That they had both been able to put on performance for each other for so long.
But yeah, they were stuck in the same house together for even just up to 4 days. And we're like, nope, this is not who I want to go through the apocalypse with. Okay. Kat says, also, even if you can process your grief, sometimes you have memories that bring all that grief back up years later, even if you feel you processed through it. As I said, like, grief is a spiral. But the person I was actually talking about in my head about, like, who 20 years their grandma died and they still hadn't, like, it was like fresh as the day as the funeral. They said they hadn't processed their grief in 20 years. Like, no, that person was just actually had avoided. I'm like, how
they had truly repressed all the emotions about it, all the thoughts about it.
I was like, what about when, like, feelings would come when other people would lose grandmas? Surely that was triggering. I mean, surely you'd have to deal with it a little bit. And they're like, no, every time that happened, I would just, and then they would insert all their coping strategies, like going to the bar. One time they joined a softball league. They were doing all these things. One time they started a business to avoid. I was like, must be nice. 6 years later, they closed the business. Like, seriously, y'all. And I was like, wow, this is what money gets you. This is amazing.
Yeah, truly. Like, if you want a country that is stable, socially, you just make a large percentage as possible middle class, because people will have enough money to avoid their problems.
Mm-hmm.
They'll find ways upon ways to avoid.
Because money, even a little bit of money, can get you a whole lot of distraction, including a bajillion hobbies and all sorts of social gatherings that where you're not talking about, like, as I said, with the Gen Xer parties, people could talk about what was actually on their mind and other people would listen and maybe try to come up with solutions or, other coping strategies, whether it's dealing with the loss of somebody's grandma or dealing with a sexual assaulting boss. They would actually try to like find solutions, versus the majority of social gatherings, I'd see people would just put on a mask and try to put forward this persona that was in no way authentic and was not really related to the person underneath. That's the dysfunction part. It's one thing to mask. I say that as a neurodivergent person who is fantastic at masking. But at some point, you're going to need to be truthful or the mask will fall apart. But first, it's going to tear you apart. Because when you're trying to be somebody you definitely are not, it wears on you. Also, the lies wear on your brain. And that is, in fact, what I had seen so much growing up and as an adult among my more middle class friends, people with more financial stability. It's just, they were very false. And I try to talk to them about it. Like, you can be at parties and actually talk about, your real struggles. I think people will understand. They're like, no, they won't. Now, that is true, of like, yeah, many people, particularly neurotypical people, will not understand and will be very judgmental. And that is where I really come to see you also got part of that grieving process is to figure out who are the people who are compassionate in your life. Who are the people who are actually supportive of your grieving journey? The grieving journey all of us now have to walk because we've lived through a pandemic world. All of us are walking this. If there is anybody who is still unsupportive and uncompassionate, you need to distance yourself from them. They are making it harder for you. Spence says, that's the kind of party person that one friend who didn't want to participate in Real Talk if it involved my grief. Yeah. And again, they're just at a different place and you let them do their journey, you do yours. Okay. But you need to be thinking about how are you surrounding yourself with compassionate, supportive people who are not judgy, or at least not judgy about your journey. Like we all, look, Tom is the sassy sibling in our family. He's sassy. He's sassy so much, I several times tried to stab him when we were children, including with a fork, with a steak knife. The tip broke off his skin. He has like dragon skin, so do not weep for Tom. He's fine, and he still has that sassy little mouth. But Tom knows when to not be sassy. If I am full of tears, don't make fun of me.
Or or I'll just simply, or I'll make a small face and I will go, I understand what you're feeling. I just had this ridiculous thought. I'm going to keep it to myself.
And I'll be like, no, tell me. Or, okay, save that for a little later and then tell me.
Yeah, I've got this sassy response for you, but yeah,
it is like, are you making fun of the person who's made me sad? He's like, yes. And I'm like, oh, I definitely want to hear this. He has learned. So as I said, like, Tom can be judgy, but not judgy destructive. Judgy, like, salty.
Yeah, I'm judgy about a lot of things, but it's not the things most people think it is that I'm judgy about. Like I'm not judgy about
people suffering,
people's emotionality, or how they cry at everything or nothing. That is not something I'm judging about. I'm judging about their choices. I'm judging about the parts where they had a chance to think about this and then they decided to do this action. That's what I judge about. What was their logic when this when this was being planned out. That's where my sass comes up. You know, hence, whenever we play games with Brian and and I have died yet again. And there's Glory being sassy right back of, you trusted Brian when he said, I've got this handled, didn't you? How many times have you played this game and seen what happens when he says that line? And how are you still surprised?
Like, literally every time Brian says something like that to me, the immediate thing I do is move my little character further away from his character just in case. Just in case. And I go, okay, now tell me what it is. Like, I'll just move my character away. Like, I don't want my character to die. I accept Brian for who he is, but also need to move my character to a safe spot before. But that's what I mean. And also, I just want to point out, I want to remind everybody, as I said, I did find one secret little magical way that inadvertently develops compassion in people, and that is that meditation where the person sits there and imagines sending thoughts of love to some kind of amount of water, whether it's their water bottle, or the water in the pipes of their house, or water in a body of water they're familiar with, like a nearby lake, or water in a beautiful lake or lagoon they saw on a picture on the internet. They just sit there and meditate for a minimum of 5 minutes, sending thoughts of love to that water, and it inadvertently develops compassion. That's not the only way to develop compassion. I want to make that very clear. There's a million roads to Rome. But it is a little way that I inadvertently, quite by accident, developed. And so if you yourself are struggling with compassion, or you have a friend who is struggling to be compassionate, particularly when you need them to be compassionate toward you, I would like to just remind you again, hey, give this a try. It might work. It costs $0 to give it a try. And Tom, who definitely was the most skeptical, sassy sibling, even found that it inadvertently worked on him. After he declared up and down for literally years that he was incapable of the feeling, the emotion, the virtue of compassion, it still worked on him.
Although I do, in retrospect, want to also bring up, we are neurodivergent. And there is a reason why our family, and a lot of families who are, all the families are neurodivergent, have a tendency to call them, the people late bloomers. Of sometimes it's just
your brain
has not developed these capacities that well yet. You are still immature, even though the neurotypicals at this age can do this. It does not necessarily mean, since you are neurodivergent, you are yet capable of this, and it may take a few more years. And that's perfectly fine to be frustrated and annoyed.
That why can't I do this thing that my older sibling or an older family member can do? Something must be wrong with me. There is nothing wrong with you. I want to make this abundantly clear. There's nothing wrong with you, but it just may be that you are a late bloomer and your brain is still working on developing all of those structures in the brain so that you can feel these feelings, you can have these thoughts that you want to have. It took an extra 20 years beyond when I wanted to look at myself in the mirror and love the person I saw. It took yet 20 more years beyond that. You okay? Because like the women's magazines in the early 90s were really pushing this love the person you are. And I was like, yes, I want to do this. I want to be very functional again because, so barely surviving. So it needed to be as functional as possible. And I wanted to love the person I saw in the mirror. And believe me, y'all, I did not like her, respect her, and I definitely didn't love her. I wanted to. I saw the merits of her by the time I was in my early 20s. I saw the merits. So she was trying her best to survive. She was trying to thrive. She was trying to learn how to be a functional person. And she was trying to love people unconditionally. I saw how hard she was working. And I still thought she was crap. And I couldn't stop those thoughts. The only time I could kind of love her was very inebriated. And then I'm like, hey, I see what you're doing. You're great. You keep trying, honey. Eventually you'll get there. That's why I literally at 27 used to talk to the mirror and go, you keep trying, babe. But I still did not love her. It took a little while longer, and I'm absolutely convinced it was my brain just needed more development, honestly.
And then sometimes it's just, you're going to have to accept that your brain is wired a certain way, and we do not have yet in modern, pharmacology, ways to get around this. And you're just going to have to deal with the logical part, accepting what is like. It took me years to finally figure out that, I've got body dysmorphia. I have true and honest body dysmorphia. I cannot see myself the way I actually look. When I look in the mirror, I see someone different. When I see myself younger, who, was at a different weight, at a different style, that, I no longer completely associate with myself, I can see how he looked. And I'm left with why was he having problems with the way he looked? He looks fine. He looks great. But the body dysmorphia is just part of me and who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to take other people's descriptions of me as honesty, and not, some form of their delusion of just, this is how my brain works. And I work with it. That's one of the nicer parts about getting older, is you start being able to, recognize yourself for who you are and what works and what doesn't work. And you know what? There's some things about you that ain't never going to work. It doesn't matter how much you work on it. It's just who you are. And you can keep working on it, and you can kind of work around it. That's the whole point of coping strategies, is how we work around it. So, I do talk to others about, what are things that make me look better, because I have such a hard time recognizing that when I look in the mirror or look at images of myself. It's just, this ain't going to work. So I have to talk to others about it. And the same thing when we deal with any kind of grief process. This is where the socializing with people you trust. And that part is very important. People you trust to converse with as you, describe your situation, where it was, and where you want to go. And since they are not in the middle of the grief process, often they can give at least some other ideas to look at and pursue and check out that you may not be immediately thinking of, just because it is harder to think about.
Good job. Good point, Tom. Someone says, I don't even own a full length mirror anymore. Yeah, neither do we.
Yeah, that's why I posted on Twitter that one time of I was so tired, I woke up one day and I looked sidelong in the mirror and I saw myself without the body dysmorphia. I was like, oh, is that what it looked like? That's pretty good.
I told you.
And there's everyone's going, why'd you post that? What are you talking about? It's like, you have no idea what I normally see in the mirror.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, some of them, it may not be a matter of give your brain time. Your brain may never stop being wired the way it is. But I will say, with age comes a bit more ability to just accept and be cool with it. Just like, man, maybe it doesn't need changing.
Oh, something else I wanted to go over real quick, because it's going to show up in any of this as well as everyone's regular life dealing with emotions, and that is the toxic form of it, that often we don't recognize because we're just trying to be part of the social group, and it's easy.
The toxic positivity thing?
The toxic positivity, the toxic masculinity and femininity, of where the social expectations go toxic, of where they're no longer part of being functional. I mean, actual positivity is about recognizing that there is joy in this world, that it's okay to enjoy things, that there's fun. Yeah, we are literally in an active apocalypse. By almost every definition possible, we are in an active apocalypse. We still have to work. How insulting is that?
So rude, I know, but I love electricity.
Yes, I do love the electricity part. But it's okay to enjoy the food, the movies that are still coming out, the conveniences we have with the internet and the ability to, hang out on Discord or hang out, on StreamYard.
Also, like, have food from almost every restaurant delivered. Look, it is absolutely okay to be like, oh, yes, this is lovely.
I love, I get to order, and I'm like, yeah, I could make my own pizza. I worked at Domino's for several years. I know how to make a decent pizza, that's at least, if not better than commercial quality. I know what the ingredients should taste like. But it's so nice to just be able to order, Papa John's
Mm-hmm.
or Domino's or Pizza Hut or Little Caesars every week. You know, or sometimes go to McDonald's even. It gets
Get some chicken nuggies for me, Tom.
That's what positivity is supposed to be about, is recognizing that there's still good. There's still enjoyment. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need to stay in a constant negative safe state to protect yourself.
You can enjoy the little things and you can even enjoy the big things. Like for me, it's Tom is not the person I thought would be the best person to survive an apocalypse with, but I am so grateful that he is on my side going through this apocalypse. And we talk about every once in a while, like, you are not the person I thought would be by my side, let alone be the most functional person in our family to go through this with.
Yeah, did not see that one coming.
Did not see that. Nope, did not see it. However, so grateful that we have this relationship and that we are going through this apocalypse together. We are both so grateful for this relationship that we are by each other's side through this apocalypse. It makes me happy to think like, yep, I got 10. It is okay to feel happy and feel joyful and feel content and peaceful about things and relationships in the middle of everything falling apart. It is absolutely okay.
But
and certainly to celebrate it. Like, we have celebrated this of like, cheers to going through the apocalypse together. I never thought it'd be this functional. Even if you told me we were having to do it together 10 years ago, I'd be like, oh, that's going to be a mess. And instead, this is the least messy my life has actually ever been. What the heck? What the heck? This is the least messy? Are you kidding?
And, as well as, the difference between, when you're raised with social roles, you still try to fulfill them. It is sort of, it's been trained into you. So it's hard to get away from those. But, like masculinity and femininity. And there's nothing wrong with also taking pride in getting to accomplish some of those things you were told, make someone good, this of like, yeah, I'm the provider. Do I really, at this point, feel like I want to stay the provider? I don't care anymore. That's how long I've been the provider for this household. I don't care. I'd be happy if Gloria was, capable and, easily able to. Is it going to happen right now? No. Do I care either way? No.
Yeah, you used to.
Yeah, I used to.
12, 15 years ago, you were like,
yes,
it bothers me that you make more money than me, Gloria. And I'm like, why would you care? It's our money. I'm not keeping it aside like a little money hoarder goblin. And you're like, I don't know, it just bothers me. Y'all, Tom finally got over it. Yeah. Spencer's tangent, I found the downside to my mom helping me do my kitchen. I can't find my rice now. Did she not put it with the other grains and starches? We literally have a tower. I don't want to take a picture, but I may take a picture of the tower of carbs.
Starch.
It's just all carbs, y'all. Even the instant mashed potatoes are in there. They're just a whole tower of carbs.
Rice flour, wheat flour, oats,
stone ground grits, all-purpose flour, bread flour,
all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I realized is, where were those lids? They had all been used for several more. Like, that's why we now have a tower.
Because that's how I store food. Oh no, they're scattered all over the kitchen. I like to group things, but you group your kitchen how you want because
But
it is
yeah, of the be careful, recognize is this something toxic or is this fine? You know, cool, versus yeah, I'm also doing the household cleaning. This would, some people we consider it a feminine trait. Toxic masculinity would go, "Oh, you're so awful for cleaning." And it's like, I'm glad I'm finally starting to be able to get around to cleaning regularly, starting to keep, the laundry and the dishes able where they're functional. I love seeing the disappointed trails of ants that no longer have any dishes to try to go for. And they're like, "What happened? We thought there was a food supply here." No, I just took an extra day to wash the dishes. Of there's nothing wrong in relishing the roles. There is something wrong in judging things by them. It's great when it works, but you also let go of things. Like, believe me, there's a part of me for some reason about 5 years ago that just really wants to be a dad. Like, just something clicked in my brain, and it's like, but I need kids. I need to raise kids. Like, now is not the time.
Now you know what Dad was experiencing, where he was proposing to various women.
Yeah.
Till Mom said yes.
I'm so glad they all said no or they didn't work out because
I inadvertently met a bunch of the women over the years who Dad had proposed to first before. Mom was the last one, obviously, because she said yes. And I inadvertently met a bunch of the other women and was like, oh, his taste in people he was proposing to got better with time, thank goodness.
Especially since he was proposing purposefully with the intent to have children.
Mm-hmm.
So like it was never a question that children were going to be in this marriage.
Right.
It's like these are women you don't raise children with. No.
Oh no, these were cold fish, y'all. These were not warm, nurturing people.
Even 20 years later, no. Still no, don't raise children. And most of these women knew it.
Yeah,
and that's why.
Yeah, that was why they were like, wait, because they were all very interested in Dad. It turns out, which, okay, that's the guy down there under Tom. That's Dad kissing Mom at their wedding.
He definitely had some Christopher Reeve looks.
I mean, he was a good-looking man.
Yeah.
And they all were interested in him, but the moment he's like, yeah, I want to have kids, they're like, oh, no. So thankfully, they took themselves out of the running. Versus Mom said, why did I asked her, why did you say yes to this man in the line to see Star Wars a second time? Or why did you, like, he proposed then, and then, a couple days later you called him and said yes. Why? And why, Mom? And she's like, because I liked how weird he was. I could tell he was weird, and I liked his kind of weird. And I knew that my kids would be that kind of weird, and I was like, yes. I'm like, who is attracted to weird? But our mom was.
Yep.
Men in dad mode are hilarious. Noah's in nesting mode at the moment, and it's so cute because it's so different than my version. I love men nesting, by the way. Oh, men nesting, they're like, we need to get out power tools and make things. I love it.
So like one of my coping strategies to handle the need to dad is I do follow an Instagram account called Black Pride and Joy, which is just
cute babies.
It's just cute babies of color, like some of the most adorable babies. It also gives me inspiration for how to photograph them.
Happy little babies. Like just adorable little hair, like fluffy hair.
Dressed up, in the cute little outfits.
They got fluffy hair like me, which is here. That is the bottom of me at 3 years old, I think it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see if that one. Yeah.
No. I think the only way to do it is to take us out of it. Or if we had a third. If someone joined us, it'll push both of us up, and then you can actually see the picture. No, we have to have a third person.
Oh.
It'll push our two.
Wait, let me just check something real quick.
Okay.
No, you're right. I don't know. Where's the
Sim
check?
says, "Bwahahaha. Yes, he came home yesterday after working a full shift and built like 4 pieces of furniture in absolute frenzy. Yes. He got very annoyed he couldn't find the last thing. Exactly. I love men in nest mode. Tom is kind of actually, if I'm honest, he's a little bit in nest mode right now. Nobody's pregnant here. But he's trying to like uncover all the comfortable seating in the house. Because it's had various like it's been cluttered. It's had crap on it. And he's uncluttering all the comfortable seating in the house, and that is hilarious and also fantastic, except when he hides my throat bowl. But again, not pregnant. I just want to make that abundantly clear. I get nauseous when I'm in pain. So, anyway.
Yeah, first you'd have to find some guy you actually like that much and enjoy being around. And that's really not much around here.
It's slim pickings, y'all. And by slim, I mean none pickings. Not like for somebody who would respect me and respect my autonomy. Nope, there's nothing like that around here. That's what I'm in. I need somewhere comfortable to be. Yes, you would be so comfortable over here at this house right now. Honestly, it's only going to get more comfortable as Tom uncovers more comfy furniture, because I am all about the comfy furniture. Because when people come over to my house, I want them to feel comfortable and welcomed rather than feel unwelcomed by the furniture. You know the furniture I'm talking about, where you sit there and after 10 minutes, your whole body aches. You don't want to sit in that chair anymore or that sofa. It's like unwelcoming. It's like the furniture is like, please leave soon. Sen says, I want my sister's couch so bad, or a chair like that. I need my mom chair. Yeah, you definitely need some good comfy
Be
furniture.
careful about saying that out loud around hubby. I mean, if he's in, a bit too strong a mode of nesting, it may just be where did that come from? It's here now. That's what matters.
Yep, that's what matters. Because, yeah, one day Tom just came home with this 2 recliner couch and had it halfway dragged into the house before I came out from my bedroom to see what was that noise. He's like, here, help me. I can't quite get it over the pivot. And I'm like, what is this? And he was like, you said you needed a recliner. But this?
Yeah, we can sit beside each other.
And not look at each other.
Look, I'm neurodivergent. That's my favorite way to watch TV is, where we can speak to each other, but we don't have to see each other's eyes.
You're not wrong. Spence says, I need a sumo chair, massive beanbag to be easier to get out of. Ooh, a recliner. Yeah, that's what you honestly need, because a good recliner will half push you out a little bit.
Yeah, say recliner.
This is one of those overstuffed leather recliner systems with this really nice middle console section that Tom found on the side of the road.
Down the street.
Yeah.
I may have, though, I did just move it myself. Of just
dragged it half a block.
Actually, I just lifted it.
It's nice when you're part appliance, aren't you?
Yeah, it does help.
Must be nice. I wouldn't know. I have no upper body strength. But that's what you need. I'm just saying. That is what you need. I will take a picture of my messy recliner system. He still hasn't uncovered the other seat. If you just want to see, if you want to feel better, I'll send you a picture of my mess. And you can see what it looks like. Yeah, the back support. It really helps with my feet because sometimes my legs, a little bit of fluid, from like PMS and stuff, or retain a little water. And it helps with my blood pressure and fluid retention. Having that recliner just immediately pop up, and then I can squeeze it down. So get a little exercise, a little bit of exercise. Highly recommend. Of course, the best recliners in the world are Lazy Boys, and I'm not just saying that because it's a Mississippi invention, but maybe I'm saying it because I've been to the Lazy Boy factory, and they're lovely people.
And our mother bought one, and even the small one was more than over-engineered for our stepdad, who is tall. He's not what I would call especially heavy, but he's still a tall, so I mean, he still weighs a decent amount. But he's definitely a plopper when he gets into things. And this thing,
he's like 6'2", And what did he weigh? Like 320,
Yeah,
340?
320 at the time.
And just he'd flop into furniture, and I was like, he gonna tear apart. If you get a children's size lazy boy, he gonna tear that thing apart. So when she dragged me to the lazy boy factory, like they had a warehouse factory floor thing where they assemble them, and she was like, here's the problem. They were like, okay, we do have a children's lazy boy that will fit you, but if we manufacture it a certain way, it can withstand up to 450 pounds.
Oh no, 650.
Oh, okay. I knew somewhere in
That's what
there.
it's like. No,
Because we
Lazy
didn't get
Boy
the
was the
force.
highest
So
weight
they
of
made
anything.
her a special one, and they did not charge her like $20 more than the usual child lazy boy price to like essentially put in some stronger springs and stuff. They just charged her cost. As I said, they're good people. They're really good people. Highly recommend. But yes, we've had like 5 second hand lazy boys in my life, and it's exactly what exactly. I love lazy boy. I have only good things to say
Yeah, I was
about
really
them.
surprised of like usually when you hear about something that's popular and been around for a while, this furniture, you're like, it's okay, but it's more of marketing. Lazy Boy, on the other hand, no, their products really are made to stand up. Like,
Plus, I talked to them about it, and I was like, "Could I reupholster it?" And they're like, "Yeah, you can absolutely." Like the structure of a lazy boy is designed to last a minimum of 150 years. So they're like, the only thing you might have to change out of the springs, depending on who was sitting it, and again, if they're a plopper, because they call that, I think, a heavy duty user. They don't actually say plop. They say a heavy duty user is
yeah,
somebody who just sort of falls into the chair. Because it'll wear the springs out faster. It's like you can replace them, and you can actually contact us, and you can order just the springs if you know what kind of lazy boy you had bought, the make and model, and we can just send those to you, and then yeah, you can absolutely reupholster your own lazy boys, especially after the warranty's out. Yeah, you can just reupholster them, and replace the foam and stuff, or send them to them. You can even drop them off at the lazy boy warehouse, and they will reupholster your lazy boy. At the time, the price was $70, and it was pretty much just cost, including the cost of one person. It would take them an hour to an hour and a half to reupholster your entire lazy boy.
yeah.
And I just appreciated that they were like, no, these are meant to last in a disposable world. These are meant to last the test of time, and I appreciate that.
Which is why, yeah, they still cost,
A fair amount.
I think it was 15 years ago now. Yeah, it cost like $500 or $700, but it was like I said, it will last you 100 years or more without a
That was
problem.
the cost of the full size lazy boy mom got for Jean. For hers, it was like $350, $360.
Oh, is that all? Well,
I know, it was a really good price. We both agree, and even I could sit in her child size lazy boy.
yeah, I'll say it wasn't actually that child size. It was a little bit lower to the ground. So yeah,
Well,
if you have
technically,
problems
it
getting up,
was. It was a little bit more narrow and
but
a
it was
little bit.
overstuffed, so
Yeah.
you fit. I will say this though, if you're ever looking at getting a recliner or furniture, at least Lazy Boys, the microfiber cloth they used, we were surprised how resilient it is to dogs scratching on it.
Oh yeah,
It did not tear as much as both a dachshund and what was Rusty? An English spit dog.
Irish spit dog.
Of like they both had a tendency to just with their front paws dig in it. Never tore, never ripped, never even showed any real signs. Like we were
It
really
didn't even
surprised.
wear thin. It didn't even
Yeah,
wear thin because they had their special little spots. They like to kind of run their paws and dig a little before they sat down. So, but yeah, total tangent. Anyway,
yeah.
um, grief. Did you have final thoughts?
The most functional way you can look at a grief situation is that it is a puzzle for your brain, and your brain is essentially trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube. And that is why you want to give it these situations of play to help it solve this problem. That's what it's really trying to do. It's just trying to solve a problem. It's not that your brain or you need to wallow in this, that they need to stay in this grief. It doesn't, to validate the loss or anything. Find some way to play with it.
Mm-hmm.
especially if you can find a few other people to play with.
Well, that was what we were going to talk about. We were going to mention various ways I've coped over the years. These little ways to help process.
Yeah. Because as we were talking about earlier, like, music. Music both helps and can also help trigger.
So that was one of those of, okay, so I don't like being triggered randomly while I'm out there living my life or working, because it's not a good time. It's not a safe time to process all these feelings. So I found that I was less likely to get triggered out in the world if I essentially set aside time to self-trigger, and then I had various art projects to work on through my triggered feelings in my triggered moment. And over the years, I've found that certain songs trigger me, like hardcore always reliably triggering me. And which, awkward if I'm out at the mall and it plays. Thankfully, most of these songs are not actually popular songs. And then one of the projects I was, so there's an entire concept of art as therapy or art therapy. And I would like to encourage everyone to explore this. If you have any interest in essentially working through your grief or trauma, in a way that, because like if you haven't found that other kinds of therapy have worked, maybe art therapy is for you. So the one that I was introduced to that is essentially, relatively speaking, the lowest cost one at the time is the magazine collage. This was introduced to me twice by two different social worker friends, where it's like, hey, you want to come to my house and we'll go through my enormous stack of magazines and make art collages? Okay. In the middle of the night, no less. Like, hey, my husband's working overnight. You could come at 11 p.m. when he leaves for his shift, and we could do this for a couple hours and drink, and then you can sleep on the couch. Like, okay. I was young. And so what you used to do is you'd cut out anything you found in a magazine that looked interesting, whether it's wording, pictures, headlines, whatever, and you have your poster board. And back in the day, we love to use what is that?
More?
No, the cement thing. What is it, that liquid
cement? Oh, dang it. What is it?
Remember Elmer's?
Cement. Yeah, Elmer's rubber cement.
Rubber cement. I was like, what is that? Rubber cement. Partly because it doesn't set immediately, so you can actually put it on the back of the thing you've cut out, the paper you cut out, let it dry, and then it'll stick kind of tacky to the poster board. And then if you want to move it, you just peel it off and stick it until you know where you want it, and then you really do then put on a fresh coat of rubber cement. So we used to like to do that. And you do not have to know what is the problem at the start of this project. You just have to sit there for like an hour or two, cutting out anything that catches your eye and putting them on your poster board and kind of just rearranging things till I like the look. And then it's like, what is it about? And then you start, I'm starting to see and you just, like with my friend, this social worker, either one of them, they're like, say, well, what I'm seeing here is like this, and there's like a mom and then, and then talking about that. Well, that's actually apparently a social worker technique with dealing with kids, is to do this little project, but it really is cathartic. In modern times, since people don't really have as many magazines, I found that I would do it with Pinterest, where I'm literally just going through Pinterest and then setting aside into, a unlisted or private board, and then start rearranging things. It's kind of a similar mental process. And anyway, and so we would listen to music maybe that was like triggering, or just sort of a mood, a vibe, and talk about it while we cut out pieces and rearrange them. And sometimes it was like in reference to maybe a poem one of us or both of us had a poem that we've written that we wanted to like have in the middle of our collage. There's plenty of other art therapy, like making puppets out of anything, including popsicle sticks, socks, random bits of felt, and making puppets. You don't have to make a puppet with like a little drama in mind. You can just make puppets, and then, oh, look, you have like a whole bunch of puppets. And then you can have conversations with your puppets, or your puppets can converse with each other. And that, again, is therapeutic. There's all sorts of art therapy techniques that you can do as a part of processing that grief, and they are fun, and nobody has to know that, you weren't trying to set out to make art for art's sake, that it was, catharsis. And, and then if you're like me, it's like, now I would like to sell it so that I could profit off of my trauma, because that makes it feel better. Highly recommend. Hello. Focus. Join us.
Sorry, lazy boy chairs.
I know. I saw it. I saw the ADHD.
But I mean, that is the beauty of having Pinterest now. You don't even have to cut them up anymore.
Right?
Although it is sometimes fun just to take out the scissors and just, the satisfaction of a good pair of scissors and magazine paper.
Oh, I'm definitely planning on doing that again once I get my little photo printer thing.
And although we'll say, like, an easy way to get free magazines is usually either the doctor's office, larger ones, or libraries have to periodically cull their magazine collection. And so just, if you don't see any there that have recently been culled, just ask the person up front working, when do they get rid of their old magazines?
Mm-hmm. Also, yeah, you can do it with like scrapbook materials. And you can do any kind of collage. Honestly, like, I've seen a bunch of people find like poster collages to be too much for them and do the little trading card collages, the little trading card size. And that was very cathartic for them. So I just want to point out, like, there's so much art activities you can do as part of your grief processing. And then you'll have something, cool looking or interesting or sellable afterwards. And it's kind of validating to have something at the end of your processing.
Yeah.
Or even in the middle of your processing. It's kind of nice to have like some physical thing. It's validating a bit of like, here, I made a thing while I processed my feelings. And then you can do it again. And every time you do it, it'll probably be different or look somewhat different. And you can have a whole bunch of stuff. Nobody has to know that it was like therapeutic for you. But you can have all these really interesting or beautiful pieces of art afterwards. And believe me, it is the definition of art. It is, don't let anyone tell you different. Those people are trying to manipulate you. It is definitely the definition of art. Of if you worked on something and made something artistic, and you do not need artistic, quote, talent or ability, by the way. If you just made something artistic while you were processing your feelings, that is definitely the actual epitome of the definition of art. So that may be something that will speak to you, because I just did not feel that I was really doing great with actual talk therapy. I found it was too confrontational. It was too much at once.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind having a conversation with a friend, but that it's very different when you've got a therapist who's definitely judging everything you're saying. And so instead, being able to talk about it without making eye contact with the person, and instead work on this art thing while talking either to my therapist or to my friends, this was, I found, really accelerated my processing without it feeling so incredibly uncomfortable. So I just want to throw that out there, especially for our neurodivergent folks. If you haven't found that therapy has really worked for you or helped you, or you did not find a therapist that really met you where you are. Perhaps explore art as therapy. Also, you'll have something cool at the end for sure.
Because, yeah, it is often difficult in the middle to express yourself, to put into words these thoughts and emotions. So often finding something that's a little bit different, that's not of the norm, and so doesn't have the emotional hangups involved, can be easier to do. So a lot of different kinds of art therapy, whether it's collage or just, literally drawing with paint or pencil, or, going on Canva and creating your own little art piece through, what they have there even, can be very therapeutic and easier to express to others. This is what I'm handling. I'm not sure what to do. And then, of course, make sure they feel free to ask you, okay, but what does this part symbolize? Well, that's the hole I'm falling into. Okay. And the Hershey's chocolate bar? That's the comfort I'm trying to get to. But since it's in parts and it's representational, it is often a lot easier to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a little bit of emotional separation. Because grief's not easy to process. If it was, we wouldn't be talking about it. It would just be something that happens to people and, they go on.
Mm-hmm.
But it ain't. So here's the important part.
So you feel like those are your final thoughts?
Yeah.
All right. Next week, July 25th. I have written down here music to soothe your inner lizard. Because that's what Tom said. Music to soothe your inner lizard.
Mm-hmm.
Share your playlist, folks. This is now the time. This is it. You got 1 week. Get your playlist together so that you can post your playlist in the chat and in the comments afterwards. Post your playlists and share them with everyone else so they can also enjoy your playlists. And it could be any feeling, any purpose. It could be, I listen to this playlist while I write. I listen to this playlist while I'm driving in the car. I listen to this playlist to cry. Whatever it is.
This is my playlist for house cleaning.
This is my playlist to dance it out. Whatever you've got. I literally have a playlist for just when I'm in the kitchen. Doesn't matter the reason I'm in the kitchen. It's just in the kitchen. And it's called In the Kitchen. And, this is the time to bring out the playlists and share them with the rest of the crowd so we all can enjoy your playlists and your music selections. And yes, we will enjoy them because, let's be honest, things are a little different now than how they were 20 or 30 years ago. It's harder to find new music because the popular music gets so much easier access. That's what we're pushed all the time. So any new song is actually harder to find than it used to be. And I thought it was hard to find back in the day when I was using Napster. And that's how I was using Napster, actually, to discover new music. And I discovered so many new artists that way that I didn't have access to. And I was like, oh, this is wonderful. And now I'm like, this is even harder without, peer-to-peer file sharing. So this is our next best thing. This is make some playlists so people can explore music that you're like, this is quality, y'all hear. Have you heard of it? The answer is probably no. So this is how you're going to introduce people to, music or to music you've heard lately. So that's what we're doing next week. I do hope you'll come and you'll share. And because whether you're like, I have all the music I need, but like everyone else obviously needs your music, or you're like, I don't have the music I need. What have y'all got? Everybody's going to benefit. So we hope you'll come. If you are unable to join us live, please be sure to post them in the comments. People do check the comments afterwards. I have learned. I have been informed. So people are still looking. About half of their viewership is actually after broadcast. And so people will still be enjoying all of this stuff. So we hope you'll come and you'll partake. of the lovely playlist sharing roundtable that we will do. Tom, anything? Go on.
No,
Your ADHD is like really wearing you down here.
look, it's just been a lot of concentration.
Yeah.
Nope, just hope everyone's having fun.
Okay.
We'll see you next week.
Well, with that, we will see you next week. Mwah, mwah, mwah. Bye-bye, everybody.